The ink wasn't even dry on the marriage certificate when Duke Adrian Blackthorne looked at his new wife and said, "You will never share my bed. You will never share my life. You are a signature on paper, nothing more." Clara Whitmore, no, Clara Blackthorne now, stood in her borrowed wedding gown, rain hammering the windows like fists, and realized she'd just sold herself into a prison with marble floors and crystal chandeliers. But here's the thing about cages. Sometimes the bars work both ways. Sometimes the jailer is just as trapped as the prisoner. This is the story of how a marriage built on ice became a fire that neither of them could control. And if you want to see how far a woman pushed to the edge can go, stay with me until the end. Drop a like, tell me what city you're watching from in the comments, and let's see how far this story travels. Because what happened next? No one saw it coming. Not even them. The Whitmore estate didn't burn down all at once. It collapsed the way empires do. Slowly, then all at once, then so completely that people forgot it had ever stood at all. Clara stood in what used to be her father's study, staring at the empty rectangle on the wall where a portrait of her grandfather had hung for 40 years. The creditors had taken it last week. They'd taken the silverware the week before that. Next week, they'd probably take the floorboards. "Miss Clara?" The voice belonged to Davies, their last remaining servant. He was 73 and had refused his severance twice. "The Duke's carriage has arrived." Clara's hands were shaking. She pressed them flat against her thighs, smoothing the wrinkles in a dress that had already been let out once and would never survive a second alteration. "Tell him I'll be down in a moment." "He said immediately, miss." Of course he did. The rain had started that morning and hadn't stopped. It was the kind of rain that made the city feel like it was melting, turning cobblestones to rivers and carriages to ships struggling upstream. Clara descended the main staircase, 23 steps. She'd counted them 1,000 times as a child, and tried not to think about how this was probably the last time she'd ever do it. The Duke was standing in the foyer with his back to her, studying the water stains spreading across the ceiling like bruises. He didn't turn when she reached the bottom step. "The roof has been leaking for 6 months, Clara said. "We couldn't afford the repairs." "I'm aware." His voice had the temperature of a January morning. "I purchased the mortgage." She'd known that. Everyone knew that. Duke Adrian Blackthorne didn't do anything quietly. He turned, and Clara got her first real look at the man she was going to marry in approximately 4 hours. He was younger than she'd expected, 30, maybe 32. Tall in a way that made the foyer seem smaller, with dark hair that looked like he cut it himself without bothering with a mirror. His face was the kind that people probably called handsome before they got close enough to see his eyes. Those eyes were gray, slate gray, the color of winter oceans and closed doors. "You understand the terms," he said. It wasn't a question. "You pay my family's debts? I become your wife, you get your council seat, I get to keep my family from starving in the streets." Clara lifted her chin. "I understand perfectly." "Good." He gestured toward the door. "We leave in 10 minutes. Bring whatever you can't live without. Nothing else will fit." "That's not much time to pack a life." "Then you'll have to prioritize." He walked past her, boots echoing on marble that her great-grandmother had imported from Verona, and Clara felt something hot and sharp lodge itself behind her ribs. Anger, maybe. Or fear that tasted like anger because fear alone would have dropped her to her knees. She packed one trunk. A few dresses, none of them good. Her mother's jewelry box, empty except for a single strand of pearls that weren't valuable enough for the creditors to bother with. A book of poetry her brother had given her before he died of fever 3 years ago. When she came back downstairs, the Duke was signing papers with Davies. A stack of banknotes sat on the hall table, more money than Clara had seen in 2 years. "That should cover the outstanding wages," Adrian said, not looking up, "and 6 months' severance." Davies' hands trembled as he picked up the notes. "Your Grace is very generous." "I'm efficient. There's a difference." The carriage ride to the cathedral took 20 minutes. They didn't speak once. Clara watched the city slide past the rain-streaked windows, the markets where she used to shop with her mother, the park where her brother had taught her to ride a bicycle, the theater where she'd seen her first opera, and tried to memorize it all before it became someone else's city. "You're crying," Adrian said. She touched her cheek. It was wet, but that might have been rain from earlier. I'm not. Don't. His voice was flat. I have no use for tears. How fortunate for both of us that I wasn't crying for your benefit. That got his attention. He looked at her properly for the first time, and something flickered across his face too quickly for her to name. You should understand something, he said. This marriage is a formality, a legal arrangement that benefits us both. I need a wife to satisfy the council's requirements for the Northern expansion vote. You need money to save your family from ruin. That's all this is. I'm aware. You'll have your own quarters, your own staff, an allowance sufficient for any reasonable expense. In return, you will appear at necessary social functions, maintain appropriate behavior, and never— He paused, and his jaw tightened. Never expect anything from me beyond what's outlined in the contract. Clara folded her hands in her lap. They'd stopped shaking. And what exactly is outlined in the contract? Financial security, social position, protection under my name. And in exchange, I give you legitimacy, respectability, the appearance of a man capable of human connection. His eyes narrowed. Don't mistake this arrangement for something it isn't. I wouldn't dream of it, Your Grace. The cathedral was older than the empire itself, all Gothic arches and stained glass that turned the rainy afternoon into something out of a fever dream. There were no guests. Adrian had been clear about that in the contract negotiations. No witnesses except what was legally required, no celebration, no pretense that this was anything other than what it was. A transaction. The priest was nervous. Clara could see it in the way his hand shook when he opened the prayer book, in the way he kept glancing at Adrian like he expected to be struck by lightning. Dearly beloved, he began, and his voice cracked. Adrian cut him off. Skip to the vows. Your Grace, the ceremony requires— I'm aware of what it requires. I'm telling you what I'll tolerate. Skip to the vows. The priest's face went red, then white, then red again. He skipped to the vows. Clara heard herself speaking words she'd imagined saying in completely different circumstances. Imagined saying to someone who loved her, in front of people who cared, in a world where marriages were about something other than preventing complete financial collapse. When Adrian spoke his vows, his voice never wavered. Each word was precisely articulated, perfectly controlled, completely empty. I now pronounce you man and wife. Adrian didn't kiss her. He signed the register, took the certificate, and walked out of the cathedral without looking back. Clara stood there for a moment, still holding the bouquet someone had shoved into her hands, white roses, already wilting, and thought, this is my wedding day. The Blackthorn estate sat on the northern edge of the capital like a fortress that had forgotten it wasn't at war. It was all dark stone and iron gates and windows that reflected the sky like shields. A woman in severe black was waiting at the entrance. She had the kind of face that suggested she'd never smiled and saw no reason to start now. Mrs. Hartwick, Adrian said, the new Duchess. Show her to the West Wing. Of course, Your Grace. Mrs. Hartwick looked at Clara the way someone might examine a stain on expensive upholstery. This way, Your Grace. The West Wing was beautiful in the way that mausoleums are beautiful. Everything was perfect and cold and utterly lifeless. The bedroom was twice the size of Clara's entire room at home, with a four-poster bed that could have slept six and windows that overlooked gardens so precisely manicured they looked painted. Dinner is at 8, Mrs. Hartwick said. His Grace expects punctuality. Does His Grace plan to attend? His Grace always dines in his study. Then why does he expect punctuality from me? Mrs. Hartwick's mouth thinned. The household maintains certain standards, Your Grace. I suggest you familiarize yourself with them. She left, and Clara was alone. She sat on the edge of the bed. The mattress didn't even dip under her weight, and stared at her hands. They were ringless except for the band Adrian had slipped on during the ceremony. Plain gold. No inscription. A knock at the door startled her. Come in. A young maid entered, curtsying so quickly she nearly lost her balance. Begging your pardon, Your Grace, Mrs. Hartwick sent me to help you dress for dinner. Clara looked down at her dress. This isn't acceptable? The maid's eyes widened. I couldn't say, Your Grace. What's your name? Annie? Your Grace. Well, Annie, I think this dress will do just fine, but thank you. Annie bobbed another curtsy and fled like the room was on fire. Clara ate dinner alone in a dining room built for 40. The food was exquisite and tasted like absolutely nothing. She spent the evening exploring the West Wing. It was 12 rooms, each more impersonal than the last. A sitting room with furniture that had never been sat on. A library with books that had never been read. A music room with a piano that probably hadn't been played in years. She found Adrian's study by following the sound of papers being shuffled. He was at his desk, surrounded by stacks of documents, lamplight carving shadows under his cheekbones. He didn't look up when she knocked. "I'm working." "I can see that." "Was there something you needed?" Clara stepped into the room. "I was wondering what the expectations are for my role here." "I gave you the list. You gave me a contract. I'm asking what you actually want." Now he looked up. "I want you to not interrupt me when I'm working." "Noted. Anything else?" "Don't embarrass me in public. Don't interfere with household operations. Don't—" He stopped, jaw working like he was physically biting back words. "Don't what?" "Don't expect this to be anything other than what it is." Clara crossed her arms. "You've said that twice now. I'm starting to think you're trying to convince yourself more than me." His eyes went flat. "Get out." "This is my house too." "No." He stood, and the movement had enough threat in it to make her step back. "This is my house. You live here by my grace. Don't forget that." "How could I?" Clara's voice shook, but she didn't leave. "You've made it abundantly clear that I'm nothing but an ornament you purchased to make your collection complete. If you understood that, you wouldn't be standing here. I'm standing here because I'm trying to figure out how to survive this. Because unlike you, I don't have the luxury of pretending people don't exist." Something dangerous flashed across his face. "You know nothing about me. I know you're more afraid of me than I am of you." The silence that followed was so complete, Clara could hear the rain picking up outside, hammering the windows like it wanted in. Adrian's voice, when he finally spoke, was very quiet. "Get out." She did. But as she walked back to her wing, her prison, her gilded cage, her new life, she thought about the way his hands had clenched when she'd spoken, the way his breathing had changed, the way he'd looked at her like she'd just said something in a language he'd forgotten he understood. He was afraid, and fear, Clara knew, was just anger that didn't know where to go yet. The first week passed in a blur of silence and routine. Clara learned the house's rhythms. Adrian left for his offices at dawn and returned after dark. Mrs. Hartwick ran the household with military precision, and the staff treated Clara like a particularly fragile piece of decoration that might shatter if they looked at it wrong. On the 8th day, an invitation arrived. Clara found it slipped under her door at breakfast. Heavy cardstock, gold lettering, the kind of invitation that wasn't really an invitation at all. The Duke and Duchess of Blackthorn are cordially invited to Lady Ashworth's annual winter ball. She brought it to Adrian's study that evening. He was at his desk again. She was starting to suspect he slept there. "We've been invited to a ball." "Decline." "It says both of us." "I'm aware of what it says." Clara set the invitation on his desk. "You married me so you'd have a wife to bring to functions like this. That was the point, wasn't it? Legitimacy. Respectability. I married you for the council vote, which requires you to appear stable, settled, like a man capable of maintaining a household." His pen stopped moving. "Are you lecturing me on politics?" "I'm reminding you of your own strategy." He looked at her then, really looked, and Clara saw the calculation happening behind his eyes. She'd learned to recognize that look. It meant he was deciding whether she was useful or simply annoying. "Fine," he said finally. "We'll attend. 2 hours. You'll stay at my side, smile appropriately, and speak only when spoken to. I'm not a trained dog. No, you're a duchess. Act like one." The ball was everything Clara had once dreamed of and now dreaded. The Ashworth estate glittered like something out of a fairy tale, all crystal chandeliers and ice sculptures and women in gowns that cost more than the Whitmore estate had been worth at its peak. Adrian's hand was on her lower back as they entered. It was the first time he'd touched her since the wedding, and his palm was warm through the silk of her dress. "Remember," he murmured, lips barely moving. 2 hours. Lady Ashworth descended on them immediately, all sharp smiles and calculating eyes. Your Grace! And the new Duchess! How absolutely delightful! She looked Clara up and down like she was evaluating livestock. What a charming dress! Is it new? It wasn't. Clara had altered one of her mother's old gowns, letting out the waist and updating the sleeves. She knew exactly what Lady Ashworth was really asking. It's vintage, Clara said smoothly. I prefer pieces with history. How economical of you. Adrian's hand tightened on her back. A warning. But Clara was done being warned. Not economical, she said on. Sentimental. Though I suppose the two often get confused by people who can't tell the difference between value and cost. Lady Ashworth's smile crystallized. How refreshing. The Duke has married a philosopher. The Duke has married a woman with opinions. I'm sure that must be very confusing for you. Adrian steered her away before Lady Ashworth could respond. His grip was just short of painful. What, he hissed, do you think you're doing? Speaking when spoken to. That was not speaking. That was declaring war. She insulted me. She's a duchess. You're supposed to take it. Clara stopped walking, forcing him to stop too. I'm also a duchess. Or did you forget? You're my duchess, which means you represent me. And I will not— Your Grace! The voice came from their left. A man was approaching, older, maybe 60, with the kind of military bearing that never quite faded. His formal uniform was immaculate except for a slight stiffness in his left leg that made his gait uneven. Adrian's entire body went rigid. Colonel Hartley, he said, and his voice was ice over stone. I heard congratulations were in order. The colonel's smile was all teeth. A new wife. How wonderfully domestic of you. If you'll excuse us, I wanted to pay my respects to the new Duchess. After all, she should know what kind of man she's married. Clara felt Adrian's hand drop from her back, felt the temperature in the immediate area plummet about 20 degrees. Colonel, Adrian said quietly, I suggest you walk away. I'm sure you do. You've always been good at suggesting people walk away, haven't you, before the consequences catch up? I don't know what you're talking about. Don't you? The colonel took a step closer, and Clara could see the rage simmering in his eyes. Captain Michael Hartley, my son. Ring any bells, Your Grace? Or do you not bother remembering the men who die because of your decisions? The ballroom hadn't gone quiet. Conversation still bubbled around them like nothing was happening, but Clara felt like she was standing in the center of a hurricane that only the three of them could feel. Adrian's face had gone completely blank. Your son was a soldier. He knew the risks. He was a 23-year-old boy following orders from a commanding officer who valued strategy over lives. The colonel's voice shook. You sent them in without proper support, without backup. You sacrificed half a battalion to win a meaningless skirmish, and your son died serving his empire. My son died because you wanted a promotion. Adrian's hand moved so fast Clara barely saw it. One moment the colonel was talking, the next Adrian had him by the collar, had pulled him close enough that Clara could see the whites of both their eyes. Your son, Adrian said, voice very soft, very dangerous, died because war is chaos and soldiers die. That's what they do. If you can't accept that, then you're more of a fool than I thought. Your Grace, Clara's voice cut through whatever was about to happen next. Both men looked at her like they'd forgotten she existed. I think we should leave. I'm not done. Yes, you are. She put her hand on Adrian's arm. He flinched like she'd struck him. We're leaving. Now. For a moment, she thought he was going to refuse, thought she was going to have to watch whatever this was explode into something that couldn't be taken back. Then Adrian released the colonel, straightened his jacket, and walked toward the exit without looking back. Clara followed. The carriage ride home was silent. Adrian stared out the window, jaw working, hands clenched in his lap. Clara could see the tendons standing out in his neck, the rapid pulse at his temple. What happened to his son? She asked quietly. Don't. I'm not asking to judge you. I'm asking because I need to understand. You don't need to understand anything. Yes, I do, because whatever that was back there, it's going to follow us. It's going to be at every function, every dinner, every public appearance, and I can't help if I don't know what I'm dealing with." Adrian's laugh was sharp and ugly. "Help? You think you can help?" "I think I'm your wife, and that means your problems are my problems, whether either of us likes it or not." He turned to look at her then, and the expression on his face was something Clara couldn't name. Pain, maybe. Or anger that had been burning so long it had turned into something else entirely. "5 years ago," he said, voice flat, "I was a colonel in the Northern Campaign. We were tasked with taking a strategic position before winter set in. Intel said it was lightly defended. They were wrong." Clara didn't speak, didn't move. "I had a choice. Retreat and lose the position, or push through and take it. I pushed through." His hands tightened until his knuckles went white. "We took the position, and I lost 47 men doing it. Captain Michael Hartley was one of them." "Was the position worth it?" "It didn't matter. We held it for 6 weeks before High Command pulled us back. 47 men dead for 6 weeks of frozen ground that we abandoned anyway." The carriage hit a bump, and Clara had to grab the seat to keep from sliding. "The colonel blames you," she said. "The colonel is right to blame me. I made the call. I gave the order. Those men died because I decided they were worth less than a strategic position that turned out to be strategically worthless." "That's not the same as murder." His head snapped toward her. "Isn't it?" "No. It's war. It's a terrible choice between bad options. It's not the same thing as not caring about their lives." "How would you know?" "Because if you didn't care, you wouldn't look like you're being torn apart from the inside when you talk about it." Adrian stared at her, and Clara saw something crack behind his eyes, something that had been locked down tight for so long that breaking was probably going to hurt worse than keeping it sealed. "I dream about them," he said, so quietly she almost didn't hear. "Every single one. I know their names, their ages, where they were from. I know that Private Davies was supposed to get married when he got home, that Sergeant Chen had 3 daughters, that Captain Hartley was 1 month away from his promotion." "Adrian, don't." He turned back to the window. "Don't try to absolve me. I don't deserve it." They didn't speak again until they reached the estate. Adrian disappeared into his study the moment they arrived. Clara went to her wing and sat on the edge of her bed, still in her ball gown, and thought about the look in his eyes when he'd talked about the men who'd died. He wasn't cold. He was frozen. There was a difference. And Clara was starting to realize that maybe, just maybe, the prison she'd been locked in had 2 prisoners instead of 1. She just had to figure out how to break them both out. The next morning, Clara woke to the sound of shouting. She pulled on a robe and followed the noise downstairs. Mrs. Hartwick was in the main hall, face red, finger jabbing toward a young footman who looked like he wanted to melt into the floor. "Utterly unacceptable. His Grace's study is not to be disturbed under any circumstances. I was just trying to... I don't care what you were trying to do. You will follow protocol or you will find employment elsewhere." Clara cleared her throat. Both of them turned. "Your Grace." Mrs. Hartwick's tone could have frozen fire. "I apologize for the disturbance. It's being handled." "What happened?" "Nothing that concerns..." "Thomas knocked over a vase," the footman blurted out, "in his Grace's study. I was trying to clean it up before anyone noticed." Mrs. Hartwick's face went purple. "You were explicitly told..." "Where's Thomas now?" Clara interrupted. "I dismissed him, immediately." "You fired him for breaking a vase?" "I fired him for incompetence. This household has standards." Clara looked at the footman. He couldn't have been more than 19, skinny in a way that suggested he'd grown 6 inches in the past year and hadn't quite figured out what to do with his new height. "What's your name?" "Peter, Your Grace." "Well, Peter, why don't you go help Thomas pack his things and tell him to wait in the kitchen? I'd like to speak with him before he leaves." Mrs. Hartwick stiffened. "Your Grace, with all due respect, household management falls under my purview. And I'm not questioning your purview. I'm asking to speak with someone before they leave my house." "This isn't..." Mrs. Hartwick caught herself. "Of course, Your Grace. As you wish." She left, spine so rigid it looked like she'd swallowed a poker. Clara found Thomas in the kitchen 20 minutes later, sitting at the servants' table with his head in his hands. He jumped up when she entered. "Your Grace, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to cause trouble. I just..." Sit down, Thomas. He sat. His hands were shaking. Clara pulled out a chair across from him. Tell me what happened. I was dusting. The vase was on the corner of His Grace's desk, and I bumped it with my elbow. It fell and shattered. I tried to clean it up, but Mrs. Hartwick came in and... His voice cracked. I need this job, Your Grace. My mother's sick, and my sister's too young to work, and I send most of my wages home, and I don't know what I'm going to... How long have you worked here? 3 months. And is this the first thing you've broken? Yes, Your Grace, I swear. Clara stood. Stay here. She found Adrian in his study, staring at the broken pieces of what had probably been a very expensive vase. Mrs. Hartwick fired Thomas, she said. He didn't look up. I'm aware. For breaking this? Yes. It was an accident. Accidents have consequences. Clara walked over to the desk and picked up one of the larger shards. It was blue porcelain, hand-painted with some kind of pastoral scene. Was this important to you? It was Ming Dynasty, worth approximately 12,000 crowns. She set the shard down carefully. Thomas has been here 3 months. He's 19 years old and supports his family on his wages. This is his first mistake. And therefore? And therefore firing him is cruel and unnecessary. Adrian finally looked at her. This household functions because people follow rules. If I make exceptions, the rules become meaningless. The rules already are meaningless if they don't account for basic human error. I didn't ask for your opinion on how I run my house. No, you just made me its duchess and expected me to sit quietly while injustice happens in my name. His jaw tightened. This has nothing to do with you. Everything that happens here has to do with me. I live here. My name is on this house just like yours. She crossed her arms. Reinstate Thomas. Take the cost of the vase out of my allowance if you need to blame someone. That's not 12,000 crowns, you said? Fine. I'll pay it back. But that boy keeps his job. Adrian stood, and Clara was reminded of just how much taller he was, how much space he could take up when he wanted to. You don't give me orders, he said quietly. I'm not ordering, I'm asking. There's a difference. Is there? Yes, an order assumes authority. A request assumes we're equals. Something dangerous flashed in his eyes. We are not equals. Then what am I? The question hung between them like smoke. Adrian's hands clenched and unclenched at his sides. You're my wife. Which means what exactly? I exist to sign papers and look pretty at balls? I have no say in anything that happens here? You have say in matters that concern you. A child losing his job because he made a mistake concerns me. Cruelty concerns me. Watching you turn into the kind of man who values a vase more than a person's livelihood, that concerns me. His face went white, then red. Get out. No. I said, I heard you, and I'm saying no. Reinstate Thomas, or I'll walk out of this house right now and tell every society matron in the capital exactly why the Duke of Blackthorn's marriage lasted less than 2 weeks. The silence that followed was so absolute Clara could hear her own heartbeat. Adrian took a step toward her, then another. He didn't stop until they were close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. You wouldn't dare, he said softly. Try me. His eyes searched her face like he was looking for a lie. Whatever he found there made his expression shift into something Clara couldn't quite read. Fine, he said. Thomas stays. The vase comes out of household expenses. And you, he leaned down until his breath stirred her hair, will never threaten me again. Are we clear? Crystal. Good. He straightened. Now get out of my study. Clara left. Her hands were shaking again, but this time from adrenaline instead of fear. She found Thomas still in the kitchen, looking like he was attending his own funeral. You're not fired, she said. He blinked. I'm not? No, but you will be more careful with expensive vases in the future. Yes, Your Grace. Thank you, Your Grace. His eyes were wet. I don't know how to thank you. Don't thank me. Just do your job well. She left him there and nearly walked straight into Mrs. Hartwick in the corridor. I assume you've countermanded my decision, the housekeeper said. I have. You do realize this undermines my authority completely. I realize you fired a teenager for making a mistake that could have happened to anyone. If that's how you maintain authority, then yes, I'm undermining it. Mrs. Hartwick's eyes narrowed. The previous Duchess never interfered. I'm not the previous Duchess. Clearly. Was there something else? Just a reminder, Your Grace, that running a household of this size requires discipline, consistency, not sentiment. Noted, Clara said. Anything else? Mrs. Hartwick smiled, and it wasn't pleasant. His Grace has invited guests for dinner tomorrow evening. I trust you'll be appropriately prepared. Who? Members of the Council and Colonel Hartley. Clara's stomach dropped. The Colonel? His Grace sent the invitation this morning. Apparently he wishes to address last night's unpleasantness directly. The housekeeper swept away, leaving Clara standing in the corridor trying to figure out what the hell Adrian was thinking. She found out that evening when she cornered him in the library. You invited Colonel Hartley to dinner. Adrian didn't look up from his book. I did. The man who publicly accused you of killing his son. Yes. To our house. For dinner. Your grasp of the situation is impressive. Clara wanted to throw something at him, preferably something heavy. Are you insane? Possibly. He turned a page. But it needs to be done. What needs to be done? Getting into another fight in our dining room instead of a ballroom? Ending this. He finally looked at her. That scene last night will be in every scandal sheet by morning. It will follow us everywhere. The only way to stop it is to face it directly. By inviting the man who hates you into your home? By controlling the narrative. If I bring him here, make peace publicly, it ends the story. If I avoid him, it becomes the story. Clara sat down in the chair across from him. And what if he doesn't want peace? Then I'll deal with it. How? That's not your concern. We've been over this. Everything that happens in this house is my concern. Adrian closed his book. What do you want from me, Clara? The question caught her off guard. He so rarely used her name. I want to understand what you're planning. I want to help if I can. I want... She stopped, searching for words. I want this to not blow up in our faces. It won't. You can't know that. I can know that I'm not going to spend the rest of my life being haunted by every decision I've ever made. His voice was hard. The Colonel wants to blame me? Fine. Let him do it to my face. Let him say everything he needs to say, and then it's done. And if it's not, then at least I'll know I tried. Clara studied him, the rigid set of his shoulders, the way his hands gripped the book like it was the only thing keeping him anchored. You feel guilty. Of course I feel guilty. No, I mean, you've been carrying this for 5 years, alone, and you think if you can just fix this one thing, apologize to this one man, it'll make the rest of it bearable. His eyes went flat. You don't know what you're talking about. Don't I? She leaned forward. Adrian, facing the Colonel isn't going to erase what happened. It's not going to bring his son back. It's not going to... I know that. The words came out sharp enough to cut. I know nothing I do will change what happened, but I have to do something. I have to... He stopped, jaw working. I can't just keep living like this. The admission hung in the air between them. Clara wanted to reach across the space and touch his hand, wanted to tell him that maybe the problem wasn't what he'd done but what he'd been doing to himself ever since, wanted to say 1,000 things that would probably make him shut down completely. Instead, she said, Okay. He frowned. Okay. Okay. We'll have the dinner. We'll face the Colonel. We'll deal with whatever happens. We? You said I was your wife. That means I'm in this with you, whether you like it or not. Something shifted in his expression, surprise maybe, or something that might have been gratitude if he'd remembered how to feel it. You don't have to. I know, but I'm going to anyway. The dinner was set for 7 o'clock the next evening. Clara spent most of the day trying to figure out what to wear to a meal that might end in bloodshed. She settled on dark blue silk, simple and elegant, with her mother's pearls. The kind of outfit that said she was taking this seriously without looking like she was trying too hard. Annie helped her dress, fingers fumbling with the buttons. Are you nervous, Your Grace? Terrified, Clara said honestly. Mrs. Hartwick says Colonel Hartley is a very important man. Mrs. Hartwick talks too much. Annie's eyes widened, but she smiled. Clara arrived in the dining room at 6:45. Adrian was already there, standing by the window in formal evening wear that made him look like he was about to attend a state funeral. "You're early," he said. "So are you." "I wanted to make sure everything was perfect." Clara looked around the room. The table was set for 8, crystal glasses, silver cutlery, arrangements of winter roses that must have cost a fortune. "It's beautiful. It's strategic." He turned to face her. "The other guests are council members. Witnesses. If the colonel makes a scene, it'll reflect badly on him, not me." "That's very calculated. That's politics. And if he doesn't make a scene, if he just sits there and lets the anger eat him alive?" Adrian's expression shuddered. "Then at least I'll have tried." The guests arrived promptly at 7. Lord Pemberton and his wife, both ancient and harmless. Lady Ashworth, still looking like she'd tasted something sour. 2 other council members whose names Clara immediately forgot. And Colonel Hartley. He walked in like he was marching to war, shoulders back, eyes hard. When he saw Adrian, something dangerous flickered across his face. "Colonel," Adrian said evenly, "thank you for coming." "Your Grace." The title sounded like an insult. "I was surprised to receive your invitation. I thought it was time we spoke, properly." "Did you?" It wasn't a question. The dinner started with painful politeness, small talk about weather, politics, the state of the roads. Clara watched the colonel throughout, noting the way his hands tightened on his fork when Adrian spoke, the way his jaw clenched every time someone called him Your Grace. By the 3rd course, the tension was thick enough to choke on. Lady Ashworth, oblivious or deliberately stirring trouble, turned to the colonel with a bright smile. "I understand you served in the Northern Campaign, Colonel. How absolutely thrilling that must have been." The colonel's smile could have cut glass. "Thrilling isn't the word I'd use." "Oh, what word would you use?" "Devastating." Adrian's fork stilled. "So many losses," the colonel continued, voice carefully neutral. "So many young men who never came home. All for strategic positions that were abandoned within weeks." Lord Pemberton coughed. His wife developed a sudden fascination with her wine glass. Adrian set down his fork carefully. "Colonel, if you have something to say—" "I'm simply making conversation, Your Grace. Isn't that what we do at these dinners? Make pleasant conversation about unpleasant things?" "Michael," Lady Ashworth started, using his first name like they were old friends. "Died following orders," the colonel finished. "Orders given by the man sitting at the head of this table. Orders that sent 47 men into a slaughter for a hill that didn't matter." The silence was absolute. Clara could see Adrian's hands clenched under the table, could see the muscle jumping in his jaw, could see him on the verge of either exploding or shattering, and neither option would end well. So she did the only thing she could think of. She stood, every head turned toward her. "Gentlemen," she said, voice steady. "Ladies, I think perhaps it's time for some honesty." Adrian's eyes went wide. "Clara, No." She looked at him, willing him to trust her. "No more careful words. No more dancing around what needs to be said." She turned to the colonel. "You lost your son. I'm sorry. I can't imagine that pain. I won't pretend to." The colonel's face was stone. "But you didn't come here tonight for an apology. You came here to hurt the man you blame for Michael's death, to make him feel what you've been feeling for 5 years. "Clara, stop. And he invited you here," she continued, voice rising, "because he's been hurting for 5 years too, because he carries the weight of those 47 men every single day, because he doesn't know how to stop feeling guilty for making a decision in an impossible situation." "He should feel guilty," the colonel said quietly. "Maybe. Probably. But guilt doesn't bring anyone back. It just turns people into ghosts haunting their own lives." Adrian stood now too. "That's enough." "No, it's not." Clara turned to face him fully. "You want to take responsibility? Fine. Take it. Tell him what you told me. Tell him you dream about his son. That you know his name, his age, that he was 1 month from his promotion. Tell him you carry that weight, and it's killing you. I can't. You can. You have to, because this. She gestured at the table, at the frozen guests, at the whole elaborate setup. Isn't fixing anything. It's just theater. Adrian's face had gone white. You have no right. I have every right. I'm your wife, and I'm not going to watch you destroy yourself over something you can't change. The colonel was staring at her like she'd grown a second head. Clara turned back to him. Your son was brave. He followed orders because that's what soldiers do. He trusted his commander because that's what good men do. And he died because war is chaos, and sometimes there are no good choices, just terrible ones and worse ones. You weren't there, the colonel said hoarsely. No. But I'm here now, and I'm watching two men who both lost something that day tear each other apart instead of finding a way to live with what happened. It's not that simple. It never is. Claire's voice softened. But maybe it could start with honesty, with admitting that both of you are in pain and blame won't make it better. The colonel looked at Adrian. Adrian looked back. I failed your son, Adrian said quietly. The room was so silent, Clara could hear her own breathing. I made a call based on intelligence that was wrong. I prioritized the mission over the men. And Michael died because of it. The colonel's hands trembled. I have no excuse, Adrian continued. No justification that makes it right. I carry the weight of that decision every day. I see his face every night, and I'm sorry. I know that means nothing, but I'm sorry. Tears were running down the colonel's face. He was a good boy, the colonel whispered. A good man. He believed in honor, in duty. I know. He wrote me letters. Every week, told me about the men he served with. How proud he was to serve under you. Adrian flinched like he'd been struck. The last letter arrived 2 days after I got word he was dead. He said, the colonel's voice broke. He said he trusted you, that if he died, it would be for something that mattered. I'm sorry. It should have mattered. The colonel's voice rose. His death should have meant something, but you threw it away. You threw all of them away for nothing. I know. My wife died 6 months after we got the news. Grief took her. I lost them both because you made a mistake. I know. Stop saying that. The colonel slammed his hand on the table. Glasses jumped. Wine sloshed. Stop being so calm about it. Stop acting like this is just another problem to manage. Adrian's control finally cracked. What do you want from me? You want me to scream, to beg, to tell you that I wake up every night drowning in guilt? Fine, I do. I can't sleep without seeing their faces. I can't make a decision without wondering if I'm about to get someone else killed. I turned myself into a machine because it was the only way to keep functioning. Is that what you wanted to hear? The silence that followed felt like the world had stopped spinning. The colonel stared at Adrian. Adrian stared back, chest heaving. You should have told me, the colonel said finally. Years ago. You should have come to me and said this. I couldn't. Adrian's voice dropped. I didn't know how. So you just avoided me? Let me think you didn't care. I care too much. That's the problem. The colonel slumped in his chair like all the fight had drained out of him. He admired you. Did you know that? Wrote home about how steady you were under fire, how you made them all feel safe. Adrian's eyes closed. He died trusting you. The colonel's voice was barely a whisper. I need to know that meant something, that his trust wasn't misplaced. Adrian opened his eyes. They were wet. His trust was the greatest honor I never deserved. I failed him. I failed all of them. But I swear to you, I swear on whatever's left of my soul, I tried. I tried to make the right call. His voice broke. I got it wrong. The colonel nodded slowly, reached up to wipe his eyes. That's all I needed to know, that you tried, that they mattered. They mattered more than anything. Clara felt something hot and sharp lodge in her throat. The other guests were frozen, forgotten, witnesses to something that had been 5 years in the making. The colonel stood, extended his hand across the table. Adrian stared at it like it might disappear. I can't forgive you, the colonel said. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But I can stop hating you. That's a start. Adrian took his hand. They stood there for a moment, two men who'd both lost too much, holding on like they might both drown if they let go. Then the colonel released his grip, nodded once to Clara, acknowledgement of something she didn't fully understand, and walked out. The other guests left quickly after that, murmuring excuses. Clara suspected they'd all be at their scandal sheets by morning, but she didn't care. When the last guest departed, Clara and Adrian were alone in the dining room. The candles had burned low. The food was cold. Adrian sat down heavily, put his head in his hands. Clara sat beside him. That was... He stopped, started again. You shouldn't have done that. Probably not. You made me look weak. I made you look human. He lifted his head. His eyes were red. I didn't ask for your help. I know. I don't need you to fight my battles. I know that too. Then why? Because sometimes the bravest thing isn't fighting. It's admitting you can't do it alone. Clara reached over and took his hand. He didn't pull away. You've been alone for 5 years, Adrian, drowning in guilt, punishing yourself, turning yourself into something cold and distant because it hurt less than feeling everything. You don't know. I know enough. I know you're not the monster you pretend to be. I know you care so much it's killing you, and I know... She squeezed his hand. I know you needed someone to see that. Adrian looked at their joined hands like he'd forgotten what touch felt like. The colonel might forgive me someday, he said quietly, but I won't. I can't. Maybe that's not the point. Maybe the point is learning to live with it instead of being destroyed by it. Is there a difference? Yes. Clara shifted closer. One keeps you frozen, the other lets you move forward. He was quiet for a long moment. Then, you called this theater. It was. But it worked. Did it? I don't know, maybe. He finally met her eyes. Thank you. For what? For not letting me do this alone, even when I insisted on it. Clara smiled. You're welcome. They sat there in the empty dining room as the candles burned down to nothing, hands still clasped. And for the first time since their wedding, Clara felt like maybe, just maybe, there was hope for them after all. They were still sitting there when the grandfather clock in the hall struck midnight. Adrian pulled his hand away first, slowly, like he'd only just realized they'd been holding on to each other for the better part of an hour. You should get some sleep, he said. Clara stood, smoothing her dress, even though there was no one left to see her. So should you. I have work to finish. Adrian, I'm fine. But his voice had that careful quality again, the one that meant he was rebuilding walls as fast as she'd torn them down. Thank you for tonight, for what you did. It was a dismissal, a polite one, but still. Clara left him there and walked back to her wing through corridors that felt less like a prison and more like a house that didn't quite know what it was yet. When she reached her bedroom, she found Annie waiting, half asleep in a chair by the fire. You didn't have to stay up, Clara said. Annie jumped to her feet. I wanted to make sure you were all right, Your Grace. After the dinner and everything? I'm fine. Tired, but fine. The whole staff's been talking about it, about what you said to the colonel. Peter said you were magnificent. Clara laughed, though it came out shaky. I don't know about magnificent. Reckless, maybe. Brave, Annie corrected. She helped Clara out of her dress, fingers more steady than they'd been that morning. We've never had anyone stand up to His Grace like that before. I wasn't standing up to him. I was standing with him. Annie's hands paused on the laces. Is there a difference? Yes, Clara said, thinking about Adrian's face when he'd finally admitted his guilt to the colonel. A big one. She slept badly that night, dreams full of battlefields and broken vases, and a man with gray eyes who kept walking away no matter how many times she called his name. The next morning brought rain again and a letter. Clara found it on the breakfast table, cream-colored paper with her name written in elegant script. She recognized the handwriting immediately. Her sister Margaret had always had perfect penmanship, one more thing their mother had praised her for, while Clara's own writing looked like spiders had died on the page. She opened it with hands that wanted to shake and forced herself to read slowly. Dearest Clara, I hope this letter finds you well in your new life. Mother and father speak of nothing but your advantageous marriage, and how fortunate we all are that you've secured such a connection. I confess I find their enthusiasm somewhat hollow, given how quickly they were willing to trade you for solvency, but perhaps I'm simply not as practical as they are. I'm writing because I need your help. Frederick has been offered a position with the merchant fleet, a real opportunity, not another one of Father's failed schemes, but it requires an initial investment. Nothing we can afford on our own, of course. Everything we had went to paying down the debts your marriage didn't cover. I know it's unfair to ask. You've already sacrificed so much for this family, but Frederick is good and kind and deserves a chance to build something that isn't collapsing under him. If there's any way you could speak to the Duke about a loan, just 5,000 crowns, we'd pay it back within 2 years. I would be forever in your debt. Your loving sister, Margaret. 5,000 crowns. Clara set the letter down and stared at it like it might spontaneously combust. She had an allowance. Adrian had made that clear in the contract, 2,000 crowns a month for personal expenses. It had seemed like a fortune at the time, more money than she'd seen in years. But 5,000 at once? That would require going to Adrian, asking for something, admitting she needed him. The thought made her stomach twist. She was still staring at the letter when Mrs. Hartwick appeared in the doorway like a particularly vindictive ghost. His Grace wishes to see you in his study. Clara's heart jumped. When? Now. Adrian was standing by the window when she entered, hands clasped behind his back. He didn't turn when she closed the door. I've been thinking about last night, he said. So have I. It was a mistake. Clara felt something cold settle in her chest. What was? Letting you get involved, allowing you to… He stopped, jaw working. You were right. It was theater, but it was my theater, my problem to solve. We talked about this. I'm your wife. In name. He turned now, and his face was that blank mask she'd come to hate. That dinner changed nothing. The colonel left without forgiving me. The council members will gossip. And you? His eyes flickered with something that might have been anger or fear or both. You saw things I never intended to share. Adrian, from now on you will attend functions when required and stay out of household and political matters. That's the arrangement. That's what we agreed to. Clara took a step forward. That was before. Before what? Before you held my hand for an hour. Before you admitted you've been drowning. Before you let yourself be human for 5 minutes. That was a lapse in judgment. That was the truth. The truth is a luxury I can't afford. His voice rose, control slipping. Do you understand what happens if I show weakness? If word gets out that the Duke of Blackthorn broke down at his own dinner table, word will get out that you're capable of remorse, of feeling, that you're not the monster people think you are. The monster is useful. The monster gets things done. The monster is going to destroy you. He laughed, sharp and bitter. Then at least I'll do it on my own terms, without someone trying to save me from myself. Clara felt tears prick her eyes and hated herself for it. I wasn't trying to save you. I was trying to help you save yourself. I didn't ask for your help. You never ask for anything. You just stand here in your fortress, pushing away anyone who gets close, punishing yourself for mistakes you can't undo. Get out. No. Clara. Fire me. She crossed her arms. Divorce me. Send me back to my family in disgrace. But I'm not leaving this room until you admit that last night meant something. His hands clenched. It meant I was weak. It meant you were honest. Same thing. No, it's not. Weakness is pretending you're fine when you're falling apart. Honesty is admitting you need help. I don't need… Yes, you do. The words came out louder than she'd intended. You need someone to tell you that carrying guilt for 5 years isn't noble. It's self-destruction. You need someone to remind you that making one terrible decision doesn't make you irredeemable. You need… Stop. His voice was very quiet. Just stop. Clara stopped, watched him stand there, shoulders rigid, breathing like he'd run a mile. I can't do this, he said finally. I can't. He turned away. I built my life a certain way for a reason. Carefully, precisely, no attachments, no vulnerabilities. And you… His voice caught. You're trying to tear it all down. Because it's killing you. Maybe I deserve to die. The words hung in the air like poison. Clara walked over to him, slowly, giving him time to retreat. He didn't. She reached out and touched his arm, felt him flinch but not pull away. No one deserves that, she said quietly. Not even you. He looked down at her hand on his sleeve. You don't know me. Not really. I know enough. I know you care more than you want to admit. I know you've been punishing yourself so long you've forgotten how to stop. And I know... She took a breath. I know you're terrified of letting anyone see the real you because you think they'll confirm what you already believe about yourself. Which is that you're not worth saving. His eyes met hers, and what she saw there made her chest hurt. Pain, raw and unguarded and absolutely devastating. What if you're wrong? He whispered. What if there's nothing left to save? Then we'll find out together. For a moment, she thought he might pull her close, might finally crack completely and let her in. She could see the war happening behind his eyes, need fighting control, and she held her breath waiting to see which would win. Then someone knocked on the door. Adrian stepped back like she'd burned him. What? Mrs. Hartwick's voice came through the wood. Urgent message from the council, Your Grace. The vote's been moved up. They want you there within the hour. Adrian's face went blank again, walls slamming back into place so fast Clara almost didn't see it happen. Tell them I'll be there shortly. Footsteps retreated. Clara let her hand drop. Adrian, we're done here. You should rest. I'll be back late. When you come back, we need to talk. There's nothing to talk about. There's everything to talk about. He grabbed his coat from the chair, shrugged into it with movements that were too precise to be natural. I have a vote to win. That's what matters. The rest is... He stopped at the door. The rest is irrelevant. He left. Clara stood alone in his study, surrounded by his books and papers and the ghost of the man he was trying so hard not to be, and wanted to scream. Instead, she went to find Mrs. Hartwick. The housekeeper was in her office, a small room off the kitchen that smelled like lavender and fresh starched linen. She looked up when Clara entered, expression carefully neutral. Your Grace, how may I help you? I need information about the household finances. Mrs. Hartwick's eyebrows rose. I'm afraid those records are confidential. I'm the Duchess. Nothing in this house is confidential from me. His Grace specifically requested... His Grace isn't here, and I'm asking. Clara sat down in the chair across from the desk without waiting for an invitation. Show me the books. For a long moment, Mrs. Hartwick just stared at her. Then slowly she pulled out a leather-bound ledger from a locked drawer. The household accounts, she said, setting it on the desk between them. Current as of yesterday. Clara opened it. The numbers swam before her eyes. Expenses, income, wages, purchases. Everything meticulously recorded in Mrs. Hartwick's perfect script. How much discretionary income do I have access to? Clara asked. Your monthly allowance is 2,000 crowns, as specified in your marriage contract. Anything beyond that requires His Grace's approval. And if I needed a larger sum, say 5,000 crowns, Mrs. Hartwick's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. That would certainly require approval. May I ask what this is regarding? My family needs help. I see. Mrs. Hartwick folded her hands on the desk. Your Grace, forgive me if I'm overstepping, but His Grace was very clear about the terms of your arrangement. He paid your family's debts. That was the agreement. He paid the debts that existed at the time. This is something new, and therefore not his responsibility. Clara closed the ledger. No, it's mine. She spent the afternoon drafting a letter to Margaret. I'll find a way. Give me a week. And trying to figure out how to ask Adrian for money without it turning into another fight about boundaries and obligations and all the ways they kept failing to understand each other. By the time evening fell, she'd given up on subtlety and decided to just ask directly. Rip the bandage off. Deal with the consequences. She was in the library when she heard the shouting. It was coming from the front of the house, male voices raised in anger. Clara ran toward the sound and found Adrian in the entrance hall facing 3 men she didn't recognize. Told you the vote was scheduled for next month, one of them was saying. You gave us your word. The schedule changed, Adrian said, voice tight. I had no control over that. You had control over your vote. You swore you'd oppose the northern expansion. I swore I'd consider all positions fairly. That's what I did. You're a liar and a coward. Adrian moved so fast, Clara barely saw it. One moment he was standing still, the next he had the man by the collar, had slammed him against the wall hard enough to rattle the paintings. Choose your next words very carefully, Adrian said, voice deadly quiet. Adrian, Clara ran forward. Let him go. He didn't look at her, didn't blink, just kept the man pinned like he was deciding whether to crush his windpipe or just break a few ribs. Your Grace, one of the other men said, hands raised. Please, we're just upset. We trusted you. You trusted a politician. That was your mistake. Adrian released the man with a shove that sent him stumbling. Get out of my house, all of you. We'll tell everyone what you did. Tell whoever you want. I won the vote. That's what matters. The men left, one of them still coughing. The front door slammed behind them hard enough to shake the chandelier. Adrian stood there, chest heaving, knuckles white where they'd gripped the man's collar. What was that? Clara asked quietly. Politics. That was assault. That was sending a message. Adrian, don't. He held up a hand. Don't start. I'm not in the mood. Those men trusted you. Those men wanted me to vote their way. I voted the way that made sense. For who? For you? For the empire? For the only option that wasn't complete disaster. He spun to face her. You think I wanted to vote for expansion? You think I wanted to send more soldiers north to die for frozen ground that doesn't matter? I voted for it because the alternative was economic collapse and civil war. So you made another impossible choice. I made the right choice. And look how well that's going for you. Clara gestured at the front door. Those men will spread word that you're untrustworthy, that you break promises, that you're the same monster I've always been. Yes, I'm aware. He started toward his study. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need 5,000 crowns. He stopped, turned. What? My sister wrote. My brother-in-law has an opportunity. He needs an investment. Clara lifted her chin. 5,000 crowns. I'll pay it back from my allowance if you want. It'll take 3 years, but I'll do it. Adrian stared at her like she'd started speaking another language. No. I'm asking, and I'm saying no. Your family got their payment. That's all they get. This isn't for them. It's for Margaret, for Frederick. They're trying to build something with my money, with a loan. No. He said it with such finality that Clara felt something crack inside her chest. The answer is no. Your family married you off to save themselves. They don't get to come back for more. That's not fair. Life isn't fair. You should know that better than anyone. Clara felt tears burning behind her eyes and refused to let them fall. I'm not asking for myself. I'm asking for people I love who deserve a chance. And I'm telling you no. This discussion is over. He walked into his study and closed the door. Clara stood in the entrance hall, shaking with anger and humiliation, and something that felt dangerously close to heartbreak. She'd been wrong. Again. Thinking that one honest moment meant he'd changed. Thinking that letting her in for 5 minutes meant the walls were actually coming down. He was the same man he'd always been. Cold, calculating, incapable of caring about anything except his own carefully controlled world. And she was the fool who'd thought she could change him. She went to her wing and pulled out her writing desk. If Adrian wouldn't help, she'd find another way. She had jewelry, not much, but maybe enough. She could sell the pearls, the few rings she had left. It wouldn't be 5,000 crowns, but it would be something. She was cataloging what she had when Annie knocked. Your Grace? There's a visitor. I'm not receiving. She said it's urgent. A Lady Ramsay? Clara frowned. She didn't know any Lady Ramsay. Send her to the drawing room. I'll be down in a moment. Lady Ramsay turned out to be a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a scar that ran from her temple to her jaw. She stood when Clara entered, curtsying with the kind of respect that seemed genuine. Your Grace, thank you for seeing me. I know it's late. How can I help you, Lady Ramsay? I was at the dinner 2 nights ago with Colonel Hartley. She hesitated. I'm his sister. I heard what you did, what you said. Clara's stomach sank. I apologize if I caused any... No, Lady Ramsay smiled. You gave him permission to grieve properly, to stop being angry and start being sad. That's a gift. I don't know if My brother has been eaten alive by rage for 5 years, blaming the Duke, blaming himself, blaming everyone. But after your dinner, he came to my house, and he cried. Her eyes were wet. He cried for Michael, really cried, for the first time since we got the news. Clara sat down heavily. I'm glad. Truly. I wanted to thank you, and to warn you. Lady Ramsay's expression shifted. Your husband is in danger. What? The men who came to your house tonight, they're part of a faction that oppose the expansion. They have connections to some very dangerous people. And they're not going to forgive him for voting against them. Claire's heart started racing. What kind of danger? The kind that ends with accidents, mysterious illnesses, carriages losing wheels at unfortunate moments. Lady Ramsay leaned forward. The Duke has enemies, Your Grace, real ones, and he's just made them very, very angry. Why are you telling me this? Because after what you did for my brother, I owe you the truth. And because, she paused, because I think you might be the only person who can get through to him, who can make him see that he can't do this alone anymore. Clara thought about Adrian in his study, walls up, pushing away help, convinced he had to carry everything himself. He won't listen to me. Then make him listen, because if he keeps going like this, those men will find a way to silence him, and you'll be a widow before you've had a chance to be a wife. Lady Ramsay left. Clara sat alone in the drawing room as the fire burned down to embers and thought about all the ways this could end badly. She could let Adrian handle it himself. Let him be the monster he insisted on being. Let him fight his battles alone until they finally killed him. Or she could do something so reckless, so absolutely insane, that he'd either fire her or finally realize she wasn't going anywhere. She made her decision before she could talk herself out of it. She found Adrian's study unlocked. He'd been careless in his anger, hadn't secured it properly. She slipped inside and went straight to his desk, looking through papers until she found what she needed. The guest list from the dinner, the names of the council members who'd been there, and more importantly, their addresses. Clara copied down 3 of them, folded the paper, and tucked it into her sleeve. Then she went to find Peter. Your Grace. He looked terrified to be summoned to her sitting room at 10 o'clock at night. Is everything all right? I need you to deliver some messages for me, tonight, without telling anyone. I don't know if I should... Peter. Clara looked at him directly. The Duke is in danger, real danger, and I'm trying to protect him. I need your help. He swallowed hard. What do you need me to do? She spent the next hour writing 3 letters, carefully worded, strategically phrased, and sent Peter out into the night with instructions to deliver them directly to the recipients, no matter how late the hour. Then she went to Adrian's study and waited. He came back at midnight, looking exhausted. Stopped dead when he saw her sitting at his desk. What are you doing in here? Waiting for you. I thought I made it clear. Lady Ramsay came to see me. That got his attention. Hartley's sister? She warned me. Said you've made enemies who won't stop at words. Adrian's expression shuddered. That's not your concern. Yes, it is. Because unlike you, I don't think you deserve to die for making hard choices. Clara, I sent letters tonight to 3 of the council members who were at our dinner, invited them here tomorrow afternoon for tea. The silence was absolute. You did what? His voice was very, very quiet. I invited them here to talk, to find common ground before this escalates. You had no right. I had every right. I'm your wife, in name only. Then divorce me. Clara stood, facing him across the desk. Divorce me and send me away and go back to being alone. But until you do, I'm going to fight for you whether you want me to or not. I don't need you to fight for me. Yes, you do, because you're so busy fighting yourself that you can't see you're about to get killed. Her voice broke. I can't watch that happen. I won't. Adrian stared at her, and something in his face cracked. Why do you care? Because someone has to. And right now I'm the only one who does. You don't know me. I know enough. I know you're not the monster you pretend to be. I know you care more than you admit. And I know... She stopped, heart racing. I know that somewhere under all that ice is a man worth saving. What if you're wrong? Then I'll deal with it. But I don't think I am. He looked at her for a long moment, and Clara saw the war happening in his eyes. The part of him that wanted to push her away fighting the part that was so tired of being alone. Cancel the tea, he said finally. No. Clara, show? No. Those people are coming here tomorrow, and we're going to talk to them, together. She walked around the desk until they were standing close enough to touch. You can hate me for it. You can punish me. But you're not doing this alone anymore. You're impossible. I'm your wife. His hand came up, almost involuntarily, and touched her cheek. The gesture was so unexpected that Clara forgot to breathe. If this goes wrong, he said quietly, if they come here and it turns into something dangerous, then we'll handle it. Together. His thumb traced her cheekbone. You're going to get yourself killed. Only if you let them kill you first. He almost smiled. Almost. You're insane. Probably. His hand dropped. But he didn't step away. Just stood there, close enough that Clara could feel the warmth coming off him. Close enough that if she leaned forward just a little, tomorrow afternoon, he said, 3 o'clock. And if this explodes, it's on you. I can live with that. He left. Clara stood alone in his study, heart pounding, hand pressed to the cheek he'd touched, and wondered if she'd just saved his life or doomed them both. Clara didn't sleep. She sat in her bedroom watching the sky turn from black to gray to the pale blue of early morning, running through everything that could go wrong. The council members wouldn't come. They'd come armed. They'd come angry. They'd see through her attempt at mediation and make everything worse. Adrian would never forgive her for interfering. The men who wanted him dead would find out about the meeting and use it as an opportunity. By the time Annie knocked at 7, Clara had convinced herself she'd made a catastrophic mistake. Your Grace? I brought tea. Clara opened the door. Annie took one look at her face and set the tray down with a clatter. You look terrible. Thank you, Annie. Very helpful. I mean, you look like you haven't slept. Are you ill? Just worried. Clara picked up the teacup with hands that shook slightly. We're having guests this afternoon, important ones. I need everything to be perfect. Mrs. Hartwick's already in a state about it. She said you scheduled a meeting without consulting her. I scheduled it without consulting anyone. Annie's eyes went wide. His Grace knows, though, right? He knows. Clara took a sip of tea. It was too hot and burned her tongue. He's not happy about it, but he knows. Is it true what Peter said, that you're trying to protect His Grace from people who want to hurt him? Clara set down the cup. Peter talks too much. He thinks you're brave. We all do. I'm not brave. I'm terrified. Aren't those the same thing? Clara looked at her, this girl who was barely 20, who'd probably never had to make a decision more serious than which dress to lay out, and felt something tighten in her chest. Sometimes, she said, but sometimes being terrified just means you're smart enough to know when you're in over your head. Are you? In over your head? Completely. Annie smiled. Then I guess we'll find out what you're made of. Clara spent the morning preparing. She had Mrs. Hartwick set up the drawing room with 3 chairs arranged in a semicircle, close enough for conversation, but not so close that anyone would feel cornered. She ordered tea and sandwiches and those small cakes that looked impressive but tasted like sawdust. She changed her dress twice before settling on dark green, serious but not severe, elegant but not ostentatious. She was adjusting the flowers in the drawing room for the 3rd time when Adrian found her. They're going to think you're trying to poison them if you keep fussing. Clara dropped the rose she'd been repositioning. I didn't hear you come in. Clearly. He walked over to the chairs, studied the arrangement. You're expecting confrontation, aren't you? I'm always expecting confrontation. It's kept me alive this long. He turned to look at her. Are you sure about this? No, but I'm doing it anyway. That seems to be your approach to most things. It's gotten me this far. He almost smiled. What's your plan for when they arrive? Let them talk. Let them be angry. Don't defend yourself until they've said everything they need to say. And then? Then we tell them the truth. Clara met his eyes. That you made the only choice that wouldn't result in worse consequences. That you're not their enemy. that fighting each other only helps the people who want to see all of you fail. You think they'll listen? I think they'll listen to me. I'm not the one who voted against them. Adrian's expression shifted into something Clara couldn't quite read. You're using yourself as a shield. I'm using myself as a bridge. That's the same thing. No, it's not. A shield stops things. A bridge connects them. He looked at her for a long moment. If this goes badly, it won't. You can't know that. No, but I can believe it. Clara straightened her shoulders. And right now, that's going to have to be enough. The first guest arrived at 2:45. Lord Pemberton, older than time and walking with a cane that looked like it had seen actual battle. Your Grace, he bowed to Adrian, nodded to Clara. I received your invitation with some confusion. I appreciate you coming, Clara said. Please, sit. The others should arrive shortly. Others? Lord Ashcroft and Baroness Whitfield. I thought it would be helpful to have a conversation about the vote, about what happens next. Lord Pemberton's eyes narrowed. The vote is over. We lost. The vote is over, Clara agreed, but the consequences are just beginning. I'd like to discuss how we navigate them without destroying each other in the process. We? All of us. The Council, the Empire. Everyone who has to live with the decisions that were made. He lowered himself into one of the chairs with a grunt. You're very bold for someone who's been a duchess for all of 2 weeks. I'm very desperate, Clara corrected. There's a difference. That got a laugh out of him. Rusty, like he hadn't used it in years, but genuine. Lord Ashcroft arrived next, tall and thin and vibrating with barely contained rage. He looked at Adrian like he was considering violence. You have 5 minutes to explain why I shouldn't walk out right now. Because my wife asked you here, Adrian said evenly, and she deserves the courtesy of being heard. Your wife, Ashcroft's lip curled. Your convenient political prop. My wife, Adrian repeated, voice going cold. Who has more courage in her little finger than you've shown in your entire career? Clara put a hand on Adrian's arm, felt the tension thrumming through him like a live wire. Lord Ashcroft, she said calmly. Thank you for coming. Please sit. I promise this won't take long. He sat, but he didn't stop glaring at Adrian. Baroness Whitfield was the last to arrive, a woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and a sharper tongue. She looked around the room and raised an eyebrow. This is cozy. Are we having tea or a tribunal? Tea, Clara said, and hopefully a conversation. About? About why we're all here, what we want, and how we might find a way forward that doesn't involve destroying each other. Whitfield sat down slowly. You have my attention. For now. Clara took a breath and stepped into the center of the semicircle. Adrian stood behind her, silent, and she could feel his eyes on her back. The Northern Expansion vote passed, she began. Lord Ashcroft, Baroness Whitfield, you both voted against it. Lord Pemberton abstained. My husband voted for it. And now we're all sitting here angry and afraid and convinced the others are enemies. We're not convinced, Ashcroft said coldly. We know. Do you? Because from where I'm standing, you're all trying to protect the same thing. The Empire, your people, the future. You just disagree on how to do it. The Duke betrayed his word. The Duke made a choice between economic collapse and military expansion, between civil war and a frozen ground, between terrible and worse. Clara looked at each of them in turn. I'm not saying it was the right choice. I'm saying it was the only choice he saw that didn't end in complete disaster. He could have abstained, Whitfield said, like Pemberton. And then what? The vote would have been deadlocked. The expansion wouldn't have happened, but neither would the trade agreements it was contingent on. The Northern Territories would have continued starving. The merchant guilds would have revolted. And in 6 months, we'd be having the same conversation, except there'd be riots in the streets. Ashcroft's hands clenched. You're making excuses for him. I'm explaining context. There's a difference. Clara stepped closer. Lord Ashcroft, your son serves in the Northern Garrison, doesn't he? His face went white. How did you... I read the briefings. The ones my husband studies every night instead of sleeping. Your son is stationed at Fort Harrow, which is currently running on quarter rations and outdated equipment because the supply lines have been cut for 3 months. That has nothing to do with, it has everything to do with this. The expansion vote included provisions for new supply routes, for better equipment, for reinforcing the northern positions so men like your son don't freeze to death in underdefended outposts. Ashcroft's jaw worked. That's manipulation. That's reality. The Duke voted for expansion partly because it was the only way to get funding for the garrisons, for the soldiers already there, including your son. The silence was heavy. Whitfield leaned back in her chair. And what about the cost? The lives that will be lost taking new territory? I'm not saying there's no cost, Clara said quietly. There's always a cost. But the Duke is trying to minimize it, to make sure that if we're going to expand, we do it properly, with support, with planning. Not like, she stopped herself, but Adrian finished the thought. Not like the Northern Campaign 5 years ago, where I sent men into hell with bad intel and inadequate backup. His voice was flat. I know what it costs when you make the wrong call. I've been paying for it every day since. Pemberton shifted in his seat. That's why you pushed for the extended timeline, for the extra planning phase. Yes, you buried it in the amendments. I thought you were stalling. I was buying time to make sure we don't repeat my mistakes. Ashcroft's anger hadn't diminished, but something else flickered in his eyes. Understanding, maybe, or at least recognition. My son wrote to me last week, he said slowly. Said morale was at an all-time low, that they'd run out of medical supplies and winter gear, that men were dying from frostbite and infected wounds because they couldn't get basic treatment. The expansion funding includes a provision for immediate supply drops to existing garrisons, Adrian said. It was the first item I negotiated. Before we take any new ground, we reinforce what we already have. You didn't mention that in the council session, because if I'd made it about saving individual soldiers, someone would have accused me of emotional manipulation, of trading on tragedy. Adrian's voice went hard. So I buried it in the logistics section and let them think it was just bureaucratic thoroughness. Whitfield was watching him with new intensity. You let us think you were heartless. Better than admitting I care too much. Caring is a weakness in politics. Is it? Clara looked at him. Or is pretending not to care what's actually destroying you? Adrian's eyes met hers, and she saw the crack in his armor, the place where the ice was starting to thaw. I don't know anymore, he said quietly. Lord Pemberton cleared his throat. I abstained because I couldn't see a clear right answer, but I've been worried since the vote passed that we'd made a terrible mistake. We might have, Adrian said, but we also might have avoided an even worse one. Time will tell. And in the meantime? In the meantime, we make sure the expansion happens as well as it possibly can. We hold the council accountable to the provisions we negotiated. We protect our people, and we stop fighting each other long enough to focus on the real threats. Which are? Ashcroft asked. The factions who want to see us fail, the ones who benefit from chaos and instability, the people who were in my entrance hall last night threatening violence because I didn't give them what they wanted. Whitfield's eyes sharpened. Who? Adrian listed 3 names. Clara watched the others' faces go pale. They have connections to organized crime, Whitfield said, to the smuggling networks in the eastern provinces. I know. They're dangerous. I know that too. Then why? She stopped. You voted for expansion knowing it would make them your enemies. I voted for expansion because it was the right call. Their anger is a consequence I'll deal with. Not alone you won't, Pemberton said. All 3 council members were looking at Adrian differently now, like they were seeing something they'd missed before. If those men are targeting you, they're targeting the council's authority. That affects all of us. I don't need... Yes, you do. Whitfield stood. We may not agree on everything, Duke Blackthorn, but we're not fools. You've made powerful enemies, and if you fall, the council falls with you. Clara felt something shift in the room. The anger was still there, simmering under the surface, but it had been joined by something else. Pragmatism, maybe, or the beginning of actual alliance. What are you proposing? Adrian asked carefully. Protection. intelligence sharing, a unified front. Pemberton hauled himself to his feet with his cane. You were right about one thing. Fighting each other only helps our real enemies. So we stopped fighting. Just like that? Just like that. Ashcroft stood as well, though he still looked like he wanted to punch someone. I don't forgive you for the vote. I think you made a mistake, but I also think... He paused, jaw tight. I also think you're trying to do right by the people we're supposed to serve. That counts for something. Adrian looked at Clara. She could see the shock in his eyes, the disbelief that this had actually worked. Thank you, he said. The words came out rough, like he wasn't used to saying them. Don't thank us yet, Whitfield said. This is conditional. You start playing political games again, hiding your actual motives behind manipulation. I won't. Adrian's voice was steady. You have my word. No more hiding. No more pretending I don't care. If we're doing this, if we're actually working together, then I'll tell you the truth. Even when it's ugly. Especially when it's ugly, Pemberton said. That's when truth matters most. They left one by one, each shaking Adrian's hand with varying degrees of warmth. When the last one departed, Clara and Adrian were alone in the drawing room with the untouched tea and sandwiches. Adrian sat down heavily, put his head in his hands. He stopped, started again. That actually worked. You sound surprised. I am surprised. Stunned, actually. He looked up at her. How did you know they'd listen? I didn't. I hoped. Clara sat down across from him. But you did the hard part. You were honest. You let them see that you're not the monster they thought you were. I let them see weakness. You let them see humanity. There's a difference. He leaned back, studying her. You're remarkable. You know that? The compliment hit her like a physical thing, made her chest tight. I'm just doing what needs to be done. No, you're doing what I couldn't do myself, what I didn't even know needed to be done. His eyes were intense. You saved me today. Again. I didn't. Yes, you did. If you hadn't arranged this, I'd still be fighting them, making more enemies, isolating myself further. He stood, crossed the space between them, and did something that made Clara's breath catch. He took her hand. Thank you, he said quietly, for not giving up on me, even when I gave you every reason to. Clara looked at their joined hands and felt something dangerous bloom in her chest, something that felt like hope and terror in equal measure. You're welcome. They stood there for a moment that stretched into infinity, hands clasped, neither of them moving. Clara could hear her own heartbeat, could feel the warmth of his palm against hers. Then Adrian did something even more unexpected. He raised her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles. The gesture was old-fashioned and oddly formal, but the way he looked at her while doing it was anything but. His eyes held something Clara had never seen before, something that made her forget how to breathe. I need to tell you something, he said. Okay. He paused, searching for words. I've been thinking. About us. About this arrangement. Clara's heart started racing. And I think... He stopped again, took a breath. I think I was wrong. About keeping you at a distance. About refusing to let you be part of my life. Adrian, let me finish. His grip on her hand tightened. I married you thinking I could keep everything separate, keep you safe by keeping you away. But you wouldn't let me. You kept pushing, kept fighting, kept refusing to be dismissed. And The door to the drawing room burst open. They sprang apart like they'd been caught doing something illicit. Mrs. Hartwick stood in the doorway, face red, breathing hard. Your Grace, there's been an incident. Adrian went rigid. What kind of incident? A fire at the northern warehouses, the ones storing supplies for the garrison expansion. Clara felt ice form in her stomach. How bad? 3 buildings, completely destroyed, and Mrs. Hartwick swallowed. They found evidence it was deliberately set. Adrian's face went blank. Who knows about this? Everyone. It's all over the city. They're saying it's retaliation for the vote. They're saying, or it is. Does it matter? The council is in an uproar. Lord Ashcroft sent word he wants an emergency session. Tonight. Adrian looked at Clara. She saw the war happening in his eyes, The part of him that wanted to retreat back behind his walls, fighting the part that was trying to stay present, stay honest, stay human. Go, she said quietly. Do what you need to do. I'll be here when you get back. Clara, we'll finish this conversation later. Right now, people need you. He nodded. Started for the door, stopped. When I get back, he said, not looking at her, we're going to talk, really talk, about everything. I'll be waiting. He left. Clara stood in the empty drawing room and tried to process what had just happened. The meeting with the council members, Adrian's confession, the fire, deliberately set, retaliation for the vote. She thought about the men who'd come to the house last night, about Lady Ramsay's warning, about how quickly anger could turn into violence when people felt powerless. She thought about Adrian walking into another impossible situation, another crisis that would demand he make another hard choice. And she thought about what he'd said before Mrs. Hartwick interrupted them. I think I was wrong. 4 words that changed everything. She was still standing there, trying to figure out her next move, when Peter appeared in the doorway. Your Grace, there's someone here to see you. She says it's urgent. Who? She wouldn't give her name, just said to tell you she has information about the fire. Clara's instincts screamed warning, but curiosity, and the need to help Adrian however she could, won out. Show her to the library. I'll be there in a moment. She found the woman waiting by the window. Mid-30s, dressed plainly, with nervous hands and eyes that darted around the room like she was checking escape routes. You wanted to see me? The woman turned. Your Grace, thank you for meeting with me. I know this is unusual. Who are you? My name is Ellen. I worked at one of the warehouses that burned. Clara's attention sharpened. Go on. I was there this afternoon, doing inventory. I saw men entering the building with cans of oil. When I asked what they were doing, they told me to leave, said I'd seen nothing. Her voice shook. I knew what was going to happen. I got out, but I couldn't. It's all right. You're safe now. Clara gestured to a chair. Sit. Tell me everything. Ellen sat on the edge of the seat like she might bolt at any second. I recognized one of the men. He works for Lord Ashcroft. Clara's blood went cold. Are you certain? I've seen him before, at council functions. He's one of Lord Ashcroft's personal guards. That doesn't make sense. Ashcroft was just here. He and my husband made peace. Did they? Ellen's eyes were sharp despite her fear. Or did Lord Ashcroft just tell you what you wanted to hear? Clara thought about the meeting, about how quickly Ashcroft had agreed to work together, about the way he'd looked at Adrian, anger barely contained beneath political necessity. Why are you telling me this? Because I have a daughter. She's 7. And if those men find out I saw them, if they think I'm going to talk... Ellen's voice broke. I need protection, for both of us. And I heard, people talk, Your Grace. They say you're different, that you care about more than politics. Well, what exactly are you asking for? Sanctuary. A place to hide until this blows over, and in exchange, I'll testify. I'll tell the authorities what I saw. Clara's mind raced. If Ashcroft was behind the fire, if he'd agreed to work with Adrian while simultaneously planning attacks, but what if Ellen was lying? What if this was a trap designed to make Adrian turn on his new allies? I need proof, Clara said. Something more than your word. Ellen reached into her coat and pulled out a folded paper. I took this from the warehouse office before I left. It's a delivery manifest. Shows who ordered the oil that was used to start the fire. Clara unfolded it. The signature at the bottom made her stomach drop. Lord Marcus Ashcroft. This could be forged, she said, even though the paper felt genuine, the ink fresh. It could be, but it's not. Ellen stood. Your Grace, I'm risking everything coming here. If you don't believe me, I'll leave. But if you do, if you help me, I can help you stop them before they do something worse. Clara looked at the manifest, looked at Ellen's frightened face, thought about Adrian at the council session right now, possibly walking into another trap. She made her decision. You'll stay here, in the West Wing. No one will know except my most trusted staff. She walked to the door, called for Mrs. Hartwick. "And tomorrow, we'll figure out what to do with this information." "Thank you, Your Grace." Ellen's relief was palpable. "You won't regret this." Clara hoped she was right. Adrian came home near midnight, looking like he'd aged 10 years. Clara was waiting in the library with tea that had gone cold and a decision she still wasn't sure about. "How bad was it?" she asked. "Catastrophic. 3 months of supplies destroyed. The garrison expansion is delayed indefinitely." He slumped into a chair. "And the council is fractured again. Half of them think it was the anti-expansion faction. The other half think it's a false flag to justify military action. What do you think?" "I think someone wants us fighting each other instead of looking at the real threat." He rubbed his eyes. "But I can't prove it." Clara pulled out the manifest, set it on the table between them. "What if you could?" He picked it up, read it, went very still. "Where did you get this?" She told him about Ellen, about the accusations, about the impossible choice she'd made to offer sanctuary without knowing if the woman was telling the truth. Adrian listened in silence. When she finished, he set down the paper carefully. "You brought a potential witness into our house, without security clearance, without verification." "Yes." "She could be an assassin." "She could be, but I don't think she is." "Based on what?" "Instinct." Adrian laughed. It came out bitter. "Instinct. That's what you're basing this on." "Instinct and the fact that this manifest exists, that it has Ashcroft's signature, that everything she said makes sense. Or it's exactly what someone would plant if they wanted to destroy the alliance we just built." Clara hadn't thought of that. The possibility made her chest tight. "What do we do?" Adrian stood, paced to the window, stood there with his back to her, shoulders rigid. "We verify," he said finally, quietly, carefully. "If Ellen's telling the truth, we have proof that someone is playing both sides. If she's lying—" He turned. "If she's lying, we've been compromised, and we need to know which before tomorrow's council session. How do we verify?" "I have contacts, people who owe me favors. I'll call them in." He looked at her, and his expression was complicated. "You took a huge risk bringing her here." "I know. It could destroy everything. Or it could save everything. We won't know until we try." He crossed the room, stood in front of her close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. "You're either the bravest person I've ever met," he said quietly, "or the most reckless." "Can I be both?" "Apparently." His hand came up, tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. The gesture was gentle, intimate. "What am I going to do with you?" "Keep me, if you want." His eyes searched hers. "What if I do want that? What if I want more than the arrangement we agreed to?" Clara's heart hammered against her ribs. "Then we'd have to figure out what that means. Together." "Together," he repeated, like he was testing the word. "I'm not good at that." "Neither am I. We'll figure it out as we go." He smiled, actually smiled. It transformed his face, made him look younger, less haunted. "You're extraordinary, you know that?" "You've mentioned it." "I mean it." His thumb traced her cheekbone. "I don't deserve you." "Probably not, but you're stuck with me anyway." He leaned down. For one breathless moment, Clara thought he was going to kiss her, wanted him to kiss her with an intensity that surprised her. Instead, he rested his forehead against hers. "When this is over," he whispered, "when we've dealt with the fire and the traitors and all of it, we're going to have that conversation, the real one, about what this is, what we are. Promise?" "Promise." They stood there, breathing the same air, closer than they'd ever been, and Clara felt something shift between them, something that felt like the beginning of something real. The verification came back at dawn. Adrian woke her with a knock on her bedroom door, eyes tired but sharp. Ellen was telling the truth, the signature's genuine. Ashcroft ordered the oil 3 days before the vote. He handed her a report. "And there's more. He's been secretly meeting with the anti-expansion faction, playing both sides, making peace with us while planning sabotage." Clara sat up. "What are you going to do?" "Expose him." At the council session this morning, his jaw tightened. and pray that the others believe me. They will. We have proof. We have a signature and witness testimony. That's not the same as proof in politics. Then make them see it, the way you made them see you yesterday." He looked at her. "Come with me." "What?" "To the session. Council meetings are technically open to spouses. No one ever attends, but it's allowed." His eyes were intense. "I want you there. I need you there." "Adrian, please, I can't." He stopped. Started again. "I don't want to do this alone anymore." Clara threw back the covers. "Give me 10 minutes to get dressed." The council chamber was smaller than Clara expected. 12 chairs arranged in a circle, windows that let in cold morning light, walls covered in portraits of dead politicians who probably would have hated each other if they'd been alive at the same time. Adrian sat in his chair. Clara stood against the back wall, trying to be invisible while also being present enough to matter. The other council members filed in. Ashcroft was the last to arrive, looking tired and irritated. "Why are we here at this hour?" he demanded. "I've had 3 hours of sleep. We're here because we have a traitor among us," Adrian said quietly. The room went silent. "Explain," Whitfield said. Adrian laid out the evidence. The manifest. Ellen's testimony. The secret meetings with the anti-expansion faction. He spoke calmly, methodically, like he was discussing crop rotations instead of treason. Ashcroft's face went from red to white to red again. "This is insanity," he said. "Someone forged that signature." "Your handwriting has been verified by 3 independent experts," Adrian said, "and your movements over the past week match Ellen's timeline perfectly. The word of a warehouse worker against a lord. The word of a witness with nothing to gain and everything to lose by coming forward," Clara said from the back of the room. Every head turned toward her. Ashcroft's eyes narrowed. "The Duchess speaks. How quaint." "The Duchess provided sanctuary to someone you tried to intimidate into silence," Clara said, walking forward. "And she's not impressed by your attempt to dismiss her because she doesn't have a title you respect." "You have no authority here." "She has the authority I give her," Adrian said coldly. "And right now, that's considerable." Pemberton cleared his throat. "If the evidence is genuine, we have a serious problem." "The evidence is manufactured." Ashcroft slammed his hand on the armrest. "This is a setup. The Duke is trying to eliminate opposition. The Duke is trying to keep the council from tearing itself apart," Whitfield interrupted. "Lord Ashcroft, if you have an explanation that makes sense, now's the time to give it." Ashcroft's mouth opened, closed, opened again. He had nothing. Clara watched the moment he realized he'd lost, saw the calculation in his eyes as he decided whether to keep fighting or cut his losses. "My son is dead," he said quietly. The words hung in the air. "What?" Adrian's voice was sharp. "My son, at Fort Harrow. The letter came yesterday." Ashcroft's hands trembled. Frostbite turned septic. They didn't have medicine. He died screaming. The room was absolutely silent. "I voted against expansion because I thought it would save him. Thought if we didn't send more men north, they'd have to pull back the ones already there." His voice broke. "But they didn't. They just left them to freeze." "Marcus," Pemberton started. "So yes, I ordered the oil. I set the fire. I sabotaged the supplies." Ashcroft looked at Adrian with naked hatred. "Because if my son had to die in that frozen hell, then no one else gets to go north safely. No one else gets the support he never had." "That's madness," Whitfield whispered. "That's grief." Clara's voice cut through the shock. She walked over to Ashcroft, stood in front of him. "And I'm sorry, truly, but destroying supplies doesn't bring him back. It just kills more sons." "I don't care." "Yes, you do. Or you wouldn't have come to our dinner. You wouldn't have listened when we talked about protecting the men already there." She crouched down so they were eye level. "Your son died because the system failed him, because we all failed him. But burning warehouses doesn't fix the system. It just feeds the fire." Ashcroft's face crumpled. Tears ran down his cheeks unchecked. "He was 23, he whispered. "He had a girl back home. They were going to marry when his service ended." "I know," Clara lied. She didn't know, but it felt true. "I know." "What happens now?" Pemberton asked quietly. Adrian stood. Lord Ashcroft will resign from the council, effective immediately. He'll face charges for the arson, but he paused. But I'll recommend leniency, given the circumstances. You'll... Ashcroft looked up, stunned. Why? Because I understand what it's like to make terrible decisions because of grief, because of guilt. Adrian's voice was rough. And because I failed your son, too. We all did. Ashcroft nodded slowly. Let the guards take him without resistance. When he was gone, the remaining council members sat in heavy silence. Well, Whitfield said finally, that was horrific. Welcome to politics, Pemberton muttered. Adrian looked at Clara. She saw exhaustion in his eyes. And something else. Something that looked like relief. We should adjourn, he said. Regroup tomorrow. They left one by one until only Clara and Adrian remained. You didn't have to do that, he said. Show mercy. Yes, I did. For him. And for you. Clara walked over, took his hand. You've been punishing yourself for 5 years for making a hard choice. I wasn't going to watch you punish someone else for the same thing. He committed arson. He committed grief. There's a difference. Adrian pulled her close. Not kissing, just holding. His arms came around her and Clara let herself lean into him, let herself be held. Thank you, he whispered into her hair. For what? For being here. For being you. For... He pulled back just enough to look at her, making me believe I might deserve a second chance. You do. We both do. He smiled. And this time, when he leaned down, he didn't stop. His lips met hers softly, carefully, like he was afraid she might break. Clara's hands came up to his chest, felt his heart hammering beneath her palms. She kissed him back and felt years of ice begin to crack. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Adrian rested his forehead against hers. This changes everything, he said. I know. I don't know how to do this, how to be... He stopped. How to be someone worth loving. Then we'll figure it out. Together. Together, he agreed. And for the first time since their wedding day, Clara looked at her husband and saw not a prison warden, or a monster, or a man made of ice. She saw a man trying to thaw, trying to heal, trying to be worthy of the second chance she was offering. And she thought maybe, just maybe, they were both going to make it after all. They were still standing there, foreheads pressed together, when the council chamber door opened again. Clara pulled back first, cheeks flushing. Adrian's hand tightened on her waist for a moment before letting go. It was Pemberton, leaning heavily on his cane. He looked between them with eyes that had seen too much to be surprised by anything anymore. Didn't mean to interrupt, he said. But there's something you both should know. The anti-expansion faction is planning a public demonstration, tomorrow, in the main square. Adrian's expression shuddered. How public? Thousands, maybe more. They're calling for your resignation, for the expansion to be repealed, for... Pemberton hesitated. For accountability, for the soldiers who've died. Let them demonstrate, Adrian said. It's their right. It would be. Except they're also calling for blood, specifically yours. The old man's voice was grim. I have it on good authority that some of them aren't planning to stop at speeches. Clara felt ice form in her stomach. You think they'll try to kill him? I think they're angry and desperate and looking for someone to blame, and your husband just became the perfect target. Adrian was already moving toward the door. I'll increase security, cancel public appearances until this blows over. No! Both men turned to stare at Clara. No? Adrian repeated. You can't hide. That's exactly what they want. For you to look weak, guilty, afraid. Clara's mind was racing. You need to go to the demonstration, face them directly. That's suicide, Pemberton said flatly. That's honesty. That's showing them you're not afraid of their anger because you know it's justified. She looked at Adrian. You've spent 5 years hiding from the consequences of your choices. This is your chance to stop hiding. Clara, they want me dead. They want someone to hear them, to acknowledge their pain, to admit that the system failed them. She grabbed his hands. Give them that. Give them the truth. And if they still want blood after I do, Then at least you'll have tried. Adrian stared at her like she'd lost her mind. You're asking me to walk into a mob that wants to tear me apart. I'm asking you to be brave enough to face the consequences of your decisions, like you did with the Colonel, like you did with Ashcroft. She squeezed his hands. You can't keep running from this. It'll destroy you. It might destroy me anyway. Maybe, but at least you'll go down fighting for something real instead of hiding behind walls that are killing you anyway. Pemberton coughed. She has a point. She has a death wish, Adrian snapped. But he was looking at Clara with something that might have been respect. Or terror. If I do this, if I go to that demonstration, you're staying here, safe. Absolutely not. Clara, you're not doing this alone. We're in this together, remember? Together doesn't mean you have to walk into danger with me. Yes, it does. That's what together means. They stood there, locked in a battle of wills, until Pemberton cleared his throat. If I may, he said dryly, you're both insane. But if you're going to be insane, at least be smart about it. I know people, guards who are loyal to the Empire, not just to whoever's paying them. I can have 50 men there by tomorrow afternoon. Make it 100, Adrian said, eyes still on Clara. And if this goes wrong, it won't. You can't know that. No, but I can believe it. And right now, that's all we have. The demonstration was scheduled for 2 o'clock. Clara spent the morning preparing like she was going to war. She chose a simple dress, dark gray, unadorned, that wouldn't look like she was trying to impress anyone, pulled her hair back in a style that was practical more than elegant, left off all jewelry except her wedding ring. Annie helped her dress, hands shaking. You don't have to do this, Your Grace. Yes, I do. But they're saying terrible things, that His Grace is a murderer, that he deserves to hang. They're angry, and they have a right to be. Clara looked at herself in the mirror. She looked older than she had a month ago. Harder. But anger doesn't get to decide what's true. What if they hurt you? Then they hurt me. But I won't let Adrian face this alone. She found him in his study, staring at papers he wasn't reading. He looked up when she entered. You're still determined to do this? Yes. I could lock you in your room. You could try. He almost smiled. You're going to be the death of me. Or the life of you. We'll find out. They took an unmarked carriage to the square. Pemberton's guards surrounded them in civilian clothes, trying to blend in. It didn't really work. They all had that military bearing that screamed training, but it was better than arriving with an armed escort. The square was packed. Clara had never seen so many people in one place. Thousands of them, like Pemberton had said, all crushed together in the space between the old cathedral and the merchant hall. Signs demanding justice. Voices raised in anger. Someone had built a platform in the center. A man was standing on it, shouting through a speaking trumpet. Duke Blackthorn claims to serve the Empire, but who does he really serve? Himself, his own power, his own... He stopped when he saw Adrian pushing through the crowd. The silence spread like ripples on water. People turning, staring, recognizing. Clara kept her hand on Adrian's arm and tried not to look as terrified as she felt. The man on the platform was young, maybe 25, with the kind of face that suggested he'd seen too much war and not enough peace. He stared at Adrian like he couldn't quite believe what he was seeing. You came, he said, and his voice cracked on the words. You called for me, Adrian said calmly. I'm here. The crowd pressed closer. Clara could feel the rage radiating off them like heat, could see hands clenching into fists, faces twisted with grief and anger. You have no right to be here, someone shouted from the back. I have every right. This is my city too. Adrian's voice carried across the square. And you have things to say to me, so say them. The young man on the platform recovered himself. You voted for expansion. You're sending more men north to die. I voted for expansion because the alternative was economic collapse, civil war, starvation in the territories we already hold. Adrian didn't flinch. I made a choice between terrible options. I chose the one I thought would save the most lives. And what about the lives it costs? The men who'll freeze in the north? The families who'll lose sons and fathers and brothers? What about them? Adrian's voice went hard. They matter. Every single one. I know because I've carried the weight of every man I've lost for 5 years. Because I dream about them. Because I... He stopped. Started again. Because I know exactly what it costs to make these choices. And I make them anyway because someone has to. That's not good enough. I know. Adrian stepped closer to the platform. I know it's not good enough. I know that every policy decision, every vote, every strategic choice comes down to real people who bleed and die and leave families behind. I know because I've been one of the people giving those orders. And I know, his voice cracked, I know that nothing I say will bring back the men we've lost. Nothing will make it right. But I'm here. I'm listening. Tell me what you need to say. The young man's hands were shaking. My brother died at Fort Harrow 3 weeks ago. Frostbite. They didn't have medicine. Clara felt Adrian go rigid beside her. I know, he said quietly. I read the report. Private James Whitford. He was 19. The young man's eyes went wide. You know his name? I know all their names. I read every casualty report. Every single one. Adrian's voice was raw. Your brother was brave. The report said he volunteered for extra patrols, that he kept morale up, even when conditions were unbearable. He paused. He was the kind of soldier that makes commanders hope they're worthy of the men they lead. The young man was crying now, tears streaming down his face. He believed in you, he choked out. He wrote home about how you'd voted for better supplies, how things would get better, and then he died because the supplies never came. Because they burned, Adrian said, because someone sabotaged them. And your brother died because I wasn't fast enough to stop it. You're damn right he did. I know, and I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. The crowd was silent now, watching, listening. Clara stepped forward. My name is Clara Blackthorne, she said, voice carrying across the square. I'm the Duke's wife, and I want you all to know something. This man, she gestured to Adrian, has been destroying himself for 5 years trying to make up for mistakes he made in impossible situations. He's carried the weight of 47 men who died in the Northern Campaign. He's read every casualty report from every garrison. He's negotiated for supplies and support and better conditions even when it meant sacrificing his own political capital. Words are easy, someone shouted. You're right, they are. But actions matter too. And the expansion vote? It included provisions for immediate supply drops to existing garrisons, for medical support, for reinforcements. Your brother, she looked at the young man, would have gotten those supplies if they hadn't been deliberately destroyed. That's convenient. That's documented. The council records are public. You can read them yourselves. Clara's voice was steady. My husband made a choice. It might have been wrong. It might have been right. Time will tell. But he made it trying to save lives, not waste them. He's a killer. He's a man who's been in impossible situations and done his best. Clara's voice rose. And you can hate him for it. You can demand he resign. You can call for his blood. But ask yourselves this. If you were in his position, if you had to choose between terrible options with lives hanging in the balance, would you do better? Would any of you? The silence was deafening. I lost my brother too, Clara continued, voice softer now. To fever, 3 years ago. He was 21, and I blamed everyone. The doctors who couldn't save him, my parents for not getting help sooner, myself for not being there. Her eyes were wet, but blame didn't bring him back. Anger didn't heal anything. It just ate me alive until I was more ghost than person. The young man on the platform was staring at her. Your brother deserves better than your rage, Clara said gently. He deserves to be remembered for who he was, what he believed in, the courage he showed. She turned to Adrian. Tell them what you told me about the men you've lost. Adrian looked at her like she'd just asked him to cut out his own heart, but he did it. Captain Michael Hartley, he said, voice barely above a whisper. 23 years old, 1 month from promotion. He wanted to be a teacher when his service ended. He died following my orders 5 years ago. He paused. The crowd waited. Private Thomas Chen, 26, 3 daughters. He died because I pushed too hard for a position that didn't matter. Another pause. Lieutenant Sarah Blackwell, 31. She played violin. She died covering a retreat I ordered. He kept going. Name after name, age after age. details that made them human instead of statistics. The crowd was crying. Clara was crying. Adrian's voice never wavered, but tears were running down his face unchecked. When he finished, 47 names later, his voice was wrecked. "I carry them," he said. "Every single one. And I'll carry your brother too. Private James Whitford, 19 years old, brave, loyal, dead because the system failed him." The young man climbed down from the platform, walked over to Adrian. For a moment, Clara thought he was going to strike him. Instead, he held out his hand. Adrian took it. "I still think you made the wrong choice," the young man said. "Maybe I did. But I believe you tried, that you care." He paused. "That's something." "It's not enough." "No, but it's a start." They stood there, hands clasped, while the crowd watched. Then the young man stepped back, turned to the crowd. "The Duke came here," he said. "He faced us. He admitted his failures. That takes courage." He paused. "James would have respected that. So I will too." Someone else stepped forward, a woman in her 50s. "My son died in the campaign," she said. "Private Davies, you mentioned him." "I remember," Adrian said quietly. "He was engaged." "He was. His fiancée still wears the ring." She looked at Adrian with eyes that held a lifetime of grief. "I hated you. For 5 years, I hated you. You had every right. But I'm tired of hating. It's killing me." Her voice broke. "Tell me it meant something. My son's death. Tell me it wasn't for nothing." Adrian looked at her, and Clara saw him make a choice. Saw him decide to be honest even if it destroyed him. "I don't know," he said. "I thought it would mean something at the time. I thought the position mattered, but it didn't. And your son died for frozen ground we abandoned 6 weeks later." The woman's face crumpled. "But," Adrian continued, voice shaking, "your son was brave. He fought for what he believed in. He trusted his commander even when that trust wasn't deserved. And he stopped. He made me realize that every decision I make carries weight. That I can't afford to be careless with lives. That if I'm going to lead, I have to be worthy of the people who follow me." "Did he change you?" "Yes. All of them did. I became..." He paused. "I became someone who couldn't afford to feel. Who turned himself into a machine because feeling everything would have destroyed me. And I've been that person for 5 years. Cold, distant, inhuman. And now?" Adrian looked at Clara. "Now I'm trying to be someone who can feel and still function, who can carry the weight without being crushed by it, who can..." His voice broke. "Who can be worthy of a second chance." The woman stepped forward, put her hand on his cheek. "My son would have forgiven you," she said softly. "He was like that, quick to forgive, slow to anger." She smiled through her tears. "So I'll forgive you too. Not because you deserve it, but because he would have wanted me to." She walked away. One by one, others came forward, some to shout, some to cry, some just to be seen, to be acknowledged, to have their grief witnessed. Adrian stood there and took it all. Every accusation, every tear, every moment of raw pain. Clara stood beside him and watched her husband finally let himself break under the weight he'd been carrying alone for so long. When the last person had spoken, when the crowd finally began to disperse, Adrian stood in the empty square like a man who'd been through battle. Clara took his hand. "You did it," she said quietly. "I broke." "No. You let yourself be human. There's a difference." He looked at her with eyes that were red and raw and completely exposed. "I don't know how to come back from this. How to be the man they need when I can barely hold myself together." "You don't have to be that man anymore. You just have to be you, flawed and trying and human." "What if that's not enough?" "Then we'll find out together." He pulled her close, buried his face in her hair, and for the first time since she'd met him, Clara felt him shake with sobs that had been 5 years in the making. She held him while he broke, held him while the sun set and the square emptied and the city moved on around them. And when he finally pulled back, eyes swollen, face raw, he looked at her like she was the only thing keeping him anchored to the earth. "I love you," he said. The words hung in the air between them like something fragile and precious. "You don't have to," I do. I love you. I don't know when it happened. Maybe it was when you stood up to me about Thomas. Maybe it was when you faced the colonel. Maybe it was every moment you refused to let me push you away. He cupped her face in his hands. I love you, and I'm terrified of it, but I'm more terrified of losing you. Clara felt tears spill down her cheeks. I love you too. Even when you're impossible, even when you're pushing me away, I love you. He kissed her. Not gentle this time, desperate, like she was air and he'd been drowning. She kissed him back and felt something shift in her chest, something that felt like hope and home and the beginning of something real. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Clara smiled. We should probably go home. Home, Adrian repeated, testing the word. Yes, let's go home. The weeks that followed were hard. The expansion proceeded with new oversight and accountability. Adrian worked 16-hour days ensuring supplies reached the garrisons, that conditions improved, that no more soldiers died from preventable causes. But he came home every night, to Clara, to the house that was starting to feel less like a prison and more like a place they were building together. They fought sometimes. Clara had opinions about his policies, and Adrian had a tendency to fall back into old patterns of control. But they talked through it, worked through it, learned how to be partners instead of adversaries. Ellen testified against the anti-expansion faction members who'd helped Ashcroft. Several arrests were made. The demonstration in the square became the turning point everyone pointed to. The moment the Duke of Blackthorn stopped being a monster and became a man. 3 months after the demonstration, Clara woke up nauseated. It took her a week to admit what she suspected. Another week to work up the courage to see a doctor. When she got the confirmation, she sat in the medical office trying to process the news. She was going to have a baby. She told Adrian that night over dinner. Just blurted it out between the fish course and dessert. I'm pregnant. He dropped his fork, stared at her. You're pregnant. About 2 months, the doctor thinks. The silence stretched until Clara started to panic. Adrian, say something. He was around the table in seconds, pulling her up, holding her so tight she could barely breathe. You're sure? Yes. We're going to have a child. Yes. He pulled back just enough to look at her, and his eyes were wet. I don't know how to do this, how to be a father. I'll probably be terrible at it. You'll be wonderful at it, because you care, because you'll try. Clara smiled, and because we'll figure it out together. Together, he agreed. The pregnancy was harder than Clara expected. Morning sickness that lasted all day, exhaustion that made her feel like she was walking through water, fears that kept her up at night. What if something went wrong? What if she wasn't ready? What if the baby inherited Adrian's tendency to push people away or her own stubborn recklessness? But Adrian was there. Every morning when she was sick, every night when she couldn't sleep, every moment when fear threatened to swallow her whole. He read books on childbirth and infant care, set up a nursery in the room next to their bedroom, because somewhere along the way Clara had moved from the West Wing to Adrian's quarters, and they'd stopped pretending they were anything other than actually married. The council noticed. Society noticed. The scandal sheets had a field day. Clara didn't care. She was too busy building a life with a man who was learning how to be human again, who smiled more, laughed sometimes, who still carried the weight of his past but had learned to share it instead of being crushed by it. The baby came on a Tuesday in early spring. 14 hours of labor that Clara was pretty sure might actually kill her. Adrian stayed the entire time, holding her hand, letting her break his fingers, whispering encouragement, even when she told him she hated him, and this was all his fault. When the baby finally arrived, a girl with dark hair and her father's gray eyes, Clara looked at Adrian's face and saw something she'd never seen before. Pure, uncomplicated joy. She's perfect, he whispered. She's wrinkled and red, Clara said, but she was crying. And perfect. They named her Charlotte, after Clara's mother and Adrian's grandmother, a name that carried history but wasn't weighed down by it. The first time Adrian held her, his hand shook. I don't know what I'm doing. Neither do I. We'll figure it out. I'm terrified I'll break her. You won't. And if you do, we'll fix it. Together. He looked at her, this man who'd been frozen solid for 5 years, and smiled. Together. 6 months later, Clara stood in the nursery watching Adrian walk Charlotte around the room, singing to her in a voice that was completely off-key, but full of love. The baby was fussing, teething, probably, but she calmed in her father's arms. Annie appeared in the doorway. "Your Grace? Lady Ramsay is here. She says it's not urgent, but she'd like to speak with you." Clara found Lady Ramsay in the drawing room, looking older but lighter somehow. "How can I help you?" "I wanted to thank you, properly." Lady Ramsay smiled. "My brother has started a foundation, in Michael's name, to support families of fallen soldiers. He asked me to invite you to the opening ceremony next month. We'd be honored. And to tell you that he's engaged to a widow whose husband died in the campaign. They're helping each other heal." Clara felt tears prick her eyes. "That's wonderful." "It is, and it wouldn't have happened without you, without that dinner, without you forcing both of them to face the pain instead of drowning in it." Lady Ramsay reached over and squeezed her hand. "You changed lives, Your Grace, mine included." After she left, Clara went back to the nursery. Adrian had managed to get Charlotte to sleep and was just standing there, watching her breathe. "Everything all right?" he asked quietly. "Everything's perfect." Clara slipped her arms around his waist, rested her head on his back. "Lady Ramsay came to thank us. The Colonel's starting a foundation." "I heard. I've already pledged funding." "Of course you have." They stood there for a moment, watching their daughter sleep, and Clara thought about how far they'd come. From a marriage built on ice and obligation to this, a partnership built on honesty and struggle and love that had been earned one difficult day at a time. "Do you ever regret it?" Adrian asked suddenly. "Marrying me? Getting stuck with all of this?" Clara turned him around to face her. "Every single day." He flinched. "I regret that you had to be so broken before we found each other. I regret that we wasted weeks pushing each other away. I regret every moment we could have been building this but weren't because we were both too scared." She smiled. "But I don't regret marrying you, not for a second. Even though I was impossible? Especially because you were impossible. It made winning you that much better." He laughed. Actually laughed. "You didn't win me. We won each other." "Is that what happened?" "Yes. You fought for me when I couldn't fight for myself, and I—" He paused. "I learned how to be someone worth fighting for." Clara reached up and kissed him, soft and slow and full of promise. "I love you," she said. "I love you too. More than I thought possible. More than I deserve. Exactly as much as you deserve. No more, no less." Charlotte made a small sound in her sleep. They both turned to look at her, this tiny person who was part of both of them, this proof that something good could come from the hardest choices. "We made that," Adrian said, voice full of wonder. "We did. I never thought—" He stopped. "I never thought I'd have this. A family, a life. Something worth protecting instead of just surviving. And now? Now I'm terrified I'll mess it up. That I'll make the wrong choices and hurt the people I love." "You will," Clara said honestly. "So will I. We'll make mistakes. We'll fight. We'll hurt each other sometimes. That's not very reassuring. But we'll fix it, together. We'll keep trying, keep growing, keep choosing each other even when it's hard." She smiled. "That's what love is. Not perfection, just persistence." Adrian pulled her close, kissed the top of her head. "Then I'll persist. For you. For her. For us. That's all I ask." They stood there in the soft light of the nursery, holding each other, watching their daughter sleep, and Clara felt something settle in her chest, something that felt like peace. She'd married a man made of ice, a fortress with walls so high nothing could get in. But walls could be climbed, ice could thaw, and the man inside, the one who'd been hiding for 5 years, had been worth every single fight it took to reach him. He wasn't perfect, neither was she. Their life together wouldn't be smooth or easy or anything close to a fairy tale, but it would be real. And real, Clara had learned, was better than perfect anyway. 2 years later, Clara stood in the same square where Adrian had faced the angry mob, but this time the crowd was cheering. The Northern Garrison Memorial was being dedicated. a monument to every soldier who died in the campaign and in the years since. 47 names from Adrian's command, hundreds more from the expansion and its aftermath. Adrian was the one giving the speech. Clara stood off to the side, holding Charlotte's hand. The little girl was 2 now, energetic and fearless, and so much like both of them, it was startling. Her other hand rested on her pregnant belly. Another baby on the way. A boy this time, according to the doctors. Adrian looked out at the crowd, families of the fallen, veterans, council members, ordinary citizens, and spoke without notes. We're here to remember, not to glorify war or celebrate conquest, but to acknowledge the cost of the choices we make as leaders, as an empire, as human beings. His voice carried across the square. Every name on this monument represents a life, a family, a future that was cut short. And every name here represents a choice someone made, to serve, to sacrifice, to trust that the people giving orders would value their lives appropriately. He paused. I was one of those people giving orders, and I failed. I made choices that cost lives. I prioritized strategy over soldiers. I convinced myself that the mission mattered more than the men. The crowd was silent. I was wrong, and I've spent the last 7 years trying to make up for it, trying to ensure that if we're going to ask people to risk their lives, we do everything possible to bring them home safely. That's not enough. It will never be enough. But it's all I have to offer. He stepped back from the podium, walked to the monument, pressed his hand against the stone where Captain Michael Hartley's name was carved. I'm sorry, he said quietly, to all of you. I'm so sorry. Someone started clapping, then another person, then the whole crowd. They weren't applauding his apology. They were acknowledging his honesty, his willingness to stand there and admit failure instead of hiding behind politics. Clara felt tears on her cheeks. Colonel Hartley stepped forward. He was older now, grayer, but his eyes were clearer than they'd been in years. The Duke made mistakes, he said to the crowd. We all have. But he spent the last 7 years trying to fix them, trying to be better. And because of him, because of the changes he pushed through, conditions in the northern garrisons have improved dramatically. Fewer soldiers are dying from preventable causes. More are coming home. He turned to Adrian. My son would have been proud of what you've become, Your Grace. I know I am. Adrian's eyes were wet. Thank you, Colonel. That means more than you know. They shook hands. The crowd cheered again. Clara watched her husband, this man who'd been so broken, so frozen, so convinced he was irredeemable, stand in the sunlight and let himself be seen, flawed and trying and human. Charlotte tugged on her hand. Mama, why is Papa crying? Because he's happy, sweetheart. Happy tears. The best kind. They walked home through streets that felt different than they had 2 years ago. Warmer, somehow. More alive. Adrian carried Charlotte on his shoulders. Clara walked beside them, hand in his, feeling the baby kick in her belly. Do you think we're doing all right? Adrian asked. As parents, as leaders, as humans? Clara finished. Yes, we're doing all right. I worry I'm not teaching her the right things, that I'll pass on my worst qualities instead of my best ones. You'll pass on both. That's how it works. Clara smiled. But she'll also get your courage, your sense of duty, your capacity for growth. And from you? Stubbornness, refusal to accept the status quo, the belief that people can change if you give them a reason to. That's quite a combination. She'll be unstoppable. Adrian laughed. I don't doubt it. They reached the house, their home. Clara still couldn't quite get used to thinking of it that way, and found the staff gathered in the entrance hall. Mrs. Hartwick stepped forward, looking almost friendly. Almost. Your Grace, we heard about the memorial ceremony. We wanted to say... She paused, uncomfortable with emotion. We wanted to say we're proud to serve you, both of you. Clara blinked back tears. Thank you, Mrs. Hartwick. That means a great deal. Thomas stepped forward, no longer a skinny teenager, but a young man who'd been promoted to head footman. We got you something. For the new baby. He presented a wrapped box. Clara opened it to find a hand-carved cradle, beautiful and intricate and clearly made with enormous care. We all contributed, Annie said shyly. Peter did the carving. Mrs. Hartwick supervised. We wanted... She stopped, blushing. We wanted the baby to have something made with love. Adrian's voice was thick. This is extraordinary. Thank you, all of you. That night, after Charlotte was in bed and the house had settled into quiet, Clara and Adrian sat in what had become their favorite room, a small sitting area between their bedroom and the nursery, with windows that overlooked the garden. Adrian pulled Clara against him, hand resting on her pregnant belly. I never thought I'd have this, he said quietly. What? Everything. You, our daughter, a son on the way, a house full of people who don't hate me, a life that feels like it's worth living. You always could have had it. You just had to let yourself. I know, but I'm glad I waited. He kissed her temple. I'm glad it was you who taught me how. Clara turned in his arms to face him. I didn't teach you anything. I just refused to let you give up on yourself. Same thing. Not really. She smiled. You did the hard work. I just reminded you it was possible. We did the hard work. Together. Together, Clara agreed. They sat there as the moon rose and the city settled into sleep, and Clara thought about the journey they'd been on. From a marriage forged in desperation to a partnership built on honesty. From two people barely surviving to a family that was thriving. It hadn't been smooth. It hadn't been easy. There had been fights and tears and moments when Clara had genuinely thought they might not make it. But they had, because they'd chosen to, again and again, every single day. That was the secret, Clara realized. Not fairy tale romance or perfect compatibility, just the choice to keep trying, to keep fighting for each other even when it was hard, especially when it was hard. What are you thinking about? Adrian asked. How far we've come, how different everything is from that first night. When I told you you'd never share my bed or my life? That night, yes. He laughed softly. I was an idiot. You were scared. I was both. Clara kissed him. You're neither now. I'm still scared sometimes, of messing this up, of not being enough. Then we'll be scared together, and we'll mess up together, and we'll figure it out. She pulled back to look at him. That's what we do, Adrian. We figure it out. Together. Always. The baby kicked hard enough that Adrian felt it through her dress. His eyes widened. Did you? He's strong, like his father. Or stubborn, like his mother. Probably both. They laughed, and the sound filled the room with warmth. Outside, the city slept. The empire continued its slow process of change. Soldiers served in garrisons that were better supplied, better supported, better valued. Families mourned but also healed. The world turned and life went on. And in one house, in one room, two people who'd been strangers 6 months ago and enemies for weeks after that sat holding each other and felt something that had seemed impossible not so long ago. They felt happy. Not perfectly happy. Not without worry or fear or the knowledge that tomorrow would bring new challenges. But happy enough. Grateful enough. Loved enough. Clara Blackthorne, once Clara Whitmore, who'd been sold into a marriage to save her family and ended up saving herself and the man she'd married, rested her head on her husband's shoulder and thought about the life they were building. The children they were raising, the legacy they would leave, not a legacy of ice and isolation and carefully controlled emotion, but a legacy of courage, of honesty, of two people who'd been broken in different ways and learned how to heal each other. That was worth something. That was worth everything. I love you, she whispered. I love you too, Adrian whispered back. And in that moment, in that room, with the moonlight streaming through the windows and their daughter sleeping peacefully nearby and their son growing strong in Clara's belly, they were exactly where they needed to be. Together. Finally, completely, wonderfully together.